In a parallel world, Yuya faces a terrifying evil god. He was determined to plunge into battle and use his sword to cut down his enemies. With unwavering courage, he unleashed sharp, decisive blows, each strike reflecting his steadfast belief in victory. Undeterred by challenges, he wielded his sword as a decisive weapon, eliminating all enemies who stood in his way of glory. After his victory, Yuya was taken to another realm by a goddess, his entire body aching from his wounds. While trying to endure it, he angrily declared that he would never want this to happen again. The goddess, with a nonchalant air, acknowledged his completion, reprimanding him for ignoring her. This angered Yuya, who retorted, pointing to his poor condition. After the goddess healed Yuya, he anxiously asked if it was really all over. She asserted that the evil spirit Ruenavilio had been destroyed and would not be able to rise again for millennia, allowing the world to gradually return to peace. Yuya then asked the goddess to take him back to his old world, but he remained skeptical about her ability to bring him back to the right world and the right timeline. The goddess assured him that once he performed the ritual and returned to the location she had designated, he would be safe, and she only needed to make a few adjustments on her part. Smiling, she noted that, despite being unexpectedly summoned from a parallel world, Yuya overcame many harsh challenges, defeated the demon lord and evil gods, and restored peace and order. Claiming to be the goddess of Valienes, she gracefully bestowed upon Yuya her gratitude and blessings. Yuya, not very enthusiastically, replied that he did not want to be summoned again, and asked her to make sure that his efforts were not in vain. The goddess replied that although she could not interfere too much in the human world, she would monitor everything as much as possible. As the divine realm was about to close, the goddess advised Yuya to return to the mortal world so that everyone would know he was safe. This made him secretly resent her for always speaking in veiled terms. As soon as he stepped out of the dilapidated hall, Yuya reunited with his group and was hugged tightly by a beast girl worried about his condition. She was horrified to see the bloodstains on his armor, but he reassured her, telling her that he had been healed. One of Yuya's teammates asked if the fight was over yet, and he confirmed that the world had been saved. Then he turned to the princess of the kingdom and told her that the rest was now her responsibility, the king's and the others. Another teammate urged him to go outside and inform the people, and Yuya walked out of the building, raising his fist in victory. He was greeted with cheers from the crowd. Although his real name is Kashiwagi Yuya, in this world he is known by the name Yuhya Kashagi. He was originally a university student, and 3 years ago, Yuya, who was summoned from modern-day Japan by Valienes to the continent of Wilterius, he was sitting in the room with Tia, a beast girl, quietly chatting. He expressed his sadness at the thought that he would never see her and the others again, even though he had fought hard to return to his original world. Tia started sobbing, and as Yuya tried to comfort her, she burst into tears, her eyes streaming as she asked him if he was really leaving forever. Yuya was shocked and silently apologized. She recalled her painful past when she lost her entire family to slave traders and was enslaved herself. He rescued her by chance, and they embarked on a journey together. Their team gradually became her second family. Yuya explained that he belonged to the old world, where his real family was waiting. Tia pleaded with him to take her along. This made Yuya pause, and he gently stroked her head to reassure her. At that moment, a servant entered and announced that the return ceremony had been prepared. The servant asked if he really wanted to return to his original world, and Yuya confirmed that. The maid, noticing that Yuya hadn't touched her at all, she unexpectedly suggested he spend a minute or two with her in the empty room next door. Yuya immediately refused. But she continued her antics, starting to unbutton her shirt and even inviting Tia to join in, even though she thought it might prolong the time. Yuya was shocked by the maid's joke, both amazed by her beauty and annoyed at the thought that he would only last a few minutes. Entering the great hall where the king and princess were waiting with their honor guard, Yuya and Tia approached and bowed. The king respected him and asked him to stand tall with pride. Then he asked Yuya if he wanted to stay in their kingdom, but Yuya firmly refused. The king continued his suggestion, claiming that perhaps even Princess Melthuria couldn't convince him, and wondered if it was because of the princess's small breasts. Desperate, he even suggested a more voluptuous maidservant, which angered the princess, who struck him on the head. Returning to her serious demeanor, Princess Melthuria apologized to Yuya for burdening him despite his status as an outsider, and expressed her and the people's boundless gratitude to him. Even though Yuya tried to refuse that honor, the princess still earnestly hoped he would decide to stay, while not hesitating to press the heel of his shoe onto his father's foot to stop him from saying more. Prince Leon approached Yuya, expressing his hope that Yuya would become his brother-in-law, and that it would be boring without Yuya around. Leon acknowledges that people are not objects to be wasted time on and thanks Yuya for everything. Bruno then cheerfully reminded them to cherish their time together on adventures and to take good care of themselves. But Whisper, a woman in the group, coldly declared she wouldn't cry for a traitor, still furious about discovering that Yuya had secretly watched the fairies bathing in the hot springs. Yuya turned back to the king and princess, thanked them for everything, and wished them all the best. The king returned the greeting and asked if he had any further requests before leaving. Yuya simply asked them to take good care of Tia, and the king and princess happily agreed. He patted Tia's head again, telling her to be good. And she tearfully begged him to come back and visit her if he ever returned to this world. Yuya agreed and bowed to the royal family before approaching the altar. At the altar, Yuya apologized to the princess for the delay, and Melthuria, blushing with embarrassment, said that there was still plenty of time to prepare for the ceremony and she understood everyone's feelings. She gently asked him to call her Mel, as he always did. Instead of maintaining formality, she felt embarrassed to see him off in such a formal atmosphere. Her warm smile made Yuya's heart flutter, and he had to try to maintain his composure in the face of the princess's cuteness. Mel asked if he was wearing the same clothes he had when he was summoned, and when Yuya nodded in confirmation, she expressed her gratitude. Although he knew they had no right to drag him into the troubles of the Wilterius world, he accepted their help without resentment. She confessed that she would never forget their kindness, and promised to live up to that promise now that the world has been saved because of him. They looked at each other in silence. It wasn't until Mel shyly admitted that she had hoped he would stay and become her husband. Yuya was startled, thinking to himself that she must have just been joking, because he had never seen any sign of it from her before. He also blamed himself for not thinking about it earlier, but then he dismissed the idea, secretly thinking that marrying a princess was beyond his reach. Princess Melthuria signaled Yuya to begin the ceremony, and as he stepped onto the altar, she wished him well, saying she was so happy to have him around, and jokingly told him to stop peeking. This made Yuya blush. She began the ritual, and a brilliant beam of light gradually filled the space, completely blinding him. As she gradually regained her eyesight, Yuya realized he was looking up at the ceiling in Japan. He stood on a chair. He recalled that this was the same place where he had sat before, being summoned to Wilterias, and felt fortunate that no one was there to witness his disappearance and return. Checking his phone, he found he had returned to the exact day he disappeared. Scrolling through his notes, he wondered if he still remembered everything, like what he had learned during the semester, or the names and faces of the people around him. After packing his things, Yuya decided to go home. But before that, he didn't forget to stop by McDonald's to satisfy his craving for cheeseburgers and fries, which he couldn't get in the other world. As we stepped out of the school grounds, he was surprised to see a beautiful girl sitting on a scooter. The girl seemed confused when he greeted her as if they hadn't met recently. And despite trying to remain calm, Yuya struggles to resist hugging his best friend Kudu Akane, whom he hasn't seen in 3 years. Akane, his friend from high school, attends the same university but is in a different department than him. After observing him closely for a moment, Akane asked if anything had happened, noting that he seemed more mature and different than before. Yuya nervously tried to brush her off, saying that it was impossible for someone to change so quickly. Akane remained skeptical and jokingly asked if he had a girlfriend. When Yuya shyly denied it, she laughed and teased him, saying he had no experience in romantic relationships. Yuya retorted that her experience wasn't much better either. This made Akane laugh and call him rude. She said she could absolutely have a boyfriend but simply wasn't ready yet. Yuya then made an excuse to leave, saying she had something to do. It's all about satisfying that burger craving. However, Akane quickly jumped onto her scooter and then rushed to the nearby burger shop to make a reservation. Confused but amused, Yuya hopped onto his motorcycle and chased after her to McDonald's. When he arrived, he saw Akane waving, and the two of them sat together. Akane observed that Yuya's gait had changed. He had a different aura, and even his physique seemed to have altered. She reiterated that he gave off a completely different vibe. Yuya tried to playfully change the subject, teasing that she might have fallen for him. Akane glared at him with a killer look, threatening to poke his eye with a straw, then looked away to hide her embarrassment. When Yuya took his first bite of the burger, he suddenly stopped and started crying. He quickly wiped away his tears, making up a story that he had added too much mustard. Then he left and went home. I'm glad to see everything is still exactly as it used to be. Entering the house, Yuya realized no one was home, because his mother was working the night shift and his father was on a business trip in the Middle East. He wasn't sure if his sister Yumi was in the room. He went upstairs and entered his room for the first time in 3 years. Everything remained exactly as it was. In the darkness, Yuya muttered the word light, and a small ball of light appeared in the air, illuminating the entire room. Then he collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. But then, slowly opening his eyes and standing up in the room now filled with warm light, Yuya stood in the middle of the brightly lit room. I was surprised to find out that I could still use magic. He couldn't help but stare in amazement at the glowing sphere hovering in the air. With further experimentation, he successfully created a small fireball on his fingertip, and a gust of wind appeared. Realizing that he could use many different kinds of magic, not just light. Looking at the watch his father had given him when he started school, Yuya curiously used his appraisal skills on it. An information window popped up, revealing that it was a fake watch, worth very little, and that his father had been scammed. After overcoming the shock, Yuya opened his status window and checked his stats. He was surprised to find that his power far exceeded the standards of this world, especially his magic abilities. He had also leveled up significantly after defeating the evil god, and the amount of MP consumed remains unchanged even in the current world. When checking the inventory, Yuya discovered he still had many of his equipment, including the holy sword. This situation was truly strange, because he thought his powers should have vanished upon his return, and over time, his memories of the other world would fade, giving way to everyday life. He wondered if it was all just a dream. Yuya quickly tried to recall everything to figure out why his magical abilities remained. He recalled the process of being summoned by Malthuria, Valianus bestowing upon him many special skills, and the arduous training in the kingdom of Arianas until he was strong enough to defeat the Demon King. Finally, he realized that the evil god was the one behind it all, and after the battle, he returned to the capital in jubilation, before returning to his old world. Looking back on his entire journey, Yuya still couldn't understand why his magic persisted. He wondered if the goddess had done something to him, but there was no way to confirm it. Anyway, it wouldn't be a problem if he didn't use magic. However, Yuya had been trained to use magic to the point of almost unconsciousness, and giving up something so convenient wasn't easy. He sighed. Think about the glowing orb, then turn on the light like a normal person. Putting aside his research on magic, artifacts, and status effects, Yuya decides to focus on concealing his abilities from others. As he changes clothes, revealing his muscular physique, Yuya is surprised to hear a knock on the door from his younger sister, Ayumi. Ayumi opened the door without waiting for an answer, walked in, and said she was hungry. Ayumi remarked that Yuya looked somehow different, even suspecting he might be taking some kind of medication. Yuya panicked, hastily concealing himself and sending her out, promising to prepare food immediately. Worried about the possibility of concealing their changes, the next day, he decided to skip school and go to a forest on Mount Okutama to test his magic and his treasure chest without being disturbed. He found himself feeling no fatigue at all despite climbing the mountain at a fairly fast pace, and recalled that his body had also changed during his time in the other world. In a moment of carelessness, Yuya stomped his foot, creating a large hole in the ground. In a panic, he tried to use magic to fill the void, but in doing so, he inadvertently created another hole, making him wonder if he was even human anymore. Standing before several large rocks, Yuya continued his experiment. They can be easily destroyed into rubble with fire arrows, ice lance, and water bullet. Seeing his own destructive power, he could only sigh. Despite practicing magic diligently, he was still surprised by his abilities, which far exceeded his expectations. Yuya opened his inventory and took out a sword. He realized he could use it as before, even though he didn't think he'd use it here. The thought of walking down the street dressed in clothes from another world struck him as odd. However, the idea of processing gemstones, or if he could magically create gold coins using earth element magic to sell for billions of dong, it would make him smile broadly. However, Yuya quickly dismissed that thought, reminding himself that he wasn't here to get rich. Although there wasn't much hope, he also felt embarrassed performing the summoning ritual and imagined someone witnessing it. Suddenly the air vibrated, and from the magic circle emerged a shadow wolf. She rushed towards him, happily licking his face as if to greet him. Surprised by the success, Yuya saw Kaguru and remembered that this wolf was a powerful and intelligent mythical creature, capable of hiding in the shadows. He reminisced about finding Kaguru in the Demon Lord's dungeon and making it his companion after defeating the enemy. Yuya apologized to the wolf for summoning it so suddenly, explaining that he only wanted to test his summoning abilities. But Kaguru was displeased because he had forgotten about him from the other world and had quickly chased him away afterward. After the experiment was over, Yuya decided to go for lunch and shopping. After indulging in KFC, he realized he had spent quite a lot of money on food. Seeing a lottery booth nearby, Yuya bought 10 scratch-off tickets and chose one for himself by using appraisal skills to choose the highest value ticket. The lottery ticket vendor called him the lucky one. He left with a large sum of money. However, Yuya suddenly felt anxious and guilty, wondering if this action was similar to stealing on easy mode. He promised himself he would never do it again. His thoughts were interrupted when he saw Akane. And a girl named Nana is being harassed by another group of male students. As he approached, Akane and Nana's faces lit up, and Akane scolded him for being late. When the leader of the boy band confronted Yuya, he quickly realized that they had extremely low scores and could be seriously injured if he didn't restrain himself. Taking a step forward, Yuya pulled a coin from his wallet and told them to look. Before easily bending a coin in front of troublemakers, asked them to leave politely. The group of boys, frightened, apologized and then ran away. Nana was delighted while Akane looked at him suspiciously and asked what he had done. Not believing Yuya's explanation that they were just talking, Akane pressed him for clarification. He had no choice but to lie, saying he had mentioned the name of a notorious acquaintance of his. Akane reluctantly accepted the explanation. Yuya then explained that he had come to shop for clothes because some of his old ones no longer fit. Hearing this, the two girls offered to help him choose clothes on the condition that he treat them to drinks. He agreed, and the group embarked on an exciting shopping spree, buying everything from drinks to dinner. This nearly emptied Yuya's wallet. Yuya was glad he had used the money wisely and decided to leave the rest in the donation box to ease his conscience. As we prepared to return, the whole group witnessed a car accident happening right before their eyes. A girl lay unconscious on the road. Yuya quickly told Nana and Ayumi to call the police and an ambulance. He ran closer to the scene to check on the girl's condition. He uses the attention-avoiding technique to make himself less noticeable and harder to spot. Annoyed to see the crowd around him only taking pictures instead of calling for help, Yuya quietly damaged their phones using his spark skill. Looking at the unconscious girl, he discovered she was still breathing. However, there was internal organ damage and a fractured skull, but the brain remained safe. Knowing he could help, Yuya used his healing skill to partially heal the girl without arousing suspicion. The girl began to regain consciousness, and Yuya reassured her not to move while waiting for the ambulance to arrive. After he stopped attention restriction, Nana told Yuya that the ambulance was on its way and that she would watch over the girl until the rescue team arrived. Yuya wondered where Akane had gone, and when he turned around, he saw her scolding the driver who had caused the accident and refused to call an ambulance. Angry at this person's indifferent attitude, walking silently through the night, he reached out and grabbed the irresponsible driver by the neck, lifting him up, and coldly asked if he had anything else to say, tightened his grip in anger. Suddenly, Akane stepped forward, grabbed his arm and pulled him close, freeing him from his rage. Yuya immediately let go, causing the driver to cough violently as he fell to the ground. An ambulance quickly arrived and took the injured girl to the hospital. Yuya then gave a statement to the police. Akane sighed, saddened that dinner had ended in an unexpected incident, and just wanted to go home and relax in a soak. Yuya said goodbye to Akane and Nana as he prepared to leave with his sister. Before Yuya left, Akane called him back. They seemed to want to say something, but then changed their minds and just waved goodbye. When Yuya went away, Nana curiously asked Akane if she was okay, and asked if she had seen any light. When Yuya checked on the girl who had been in the accident, Akane hesitated, thinking that perhaps she couldn't see clearly because of the crowd, but admitting that Yuya looked really cool at the time made Akane blush in embarrassment. She looked forward to hearing her thoughts about him that evening. Nana laughed and recalled the scene where Akane hugged Yuya. "I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about him that evening." Akane denied it in embarrassment, trying to explain that she hadn't hugged him for any other reason. 2 days later, Yuya arrived at her part-time job, wearing a t-shirt so tight it looked like it would rip. The girl involved in the accident wasn't seriously injured and only needed a week of rest before returning to school. Conversely, the driver only had his license suspended because he wasn't drunk. But Yuya placed a curse on him, learned from the Demon Lord's library, causing him to suffer from diarrhea whenever he felt lustful, until Yuya removed the curse. Upon entering the restaurant, Yuya was greeted by the manager Mizukati, who noticed he had arrived early. He praised his hard work and then assigned him a service area. After returning from 3 years away and realizing that time on Earth hadn't passed, Yuya wasn't sure he could function normally. To his surprise, he saw Mizukati looking at him with a bewildered expression, asking why he was only wearing half his shirt. Then she apologized and quickly got him a new shirt because the old one no longer fit. Mizukati was flustered when she opened the wardrobe. He wondered to himself if Yuya had always been this muscular. He was surprised to see the beautiful manager Mizusaki become flustered in front of him, and decided to keep his display of muscles a secret to avoid further embarrassment. After putting on his new shirt, Yuya entered the service area and began diligently serving customers. This prompted a colleague named Atamulti to comment on the situation to the manager, who was engrossed in watching. Yuya realized that despite his hesitation, he still performed well thanks to his superior physical strength. He also discovered that serving customers was enjoyable. Yuya's thoughts were interrupted when his colleague Demoni asked some customers to lower their volume so as not to disturb others. When the man reacted rudely, Yuya calmly stepped forward and asked them to leave if they didn't comply. The customer then insulted Yuya, insisting that the customer is king. Yuya responded intelligently and politely, asking them to leave. The guests angrily stood up, but quickly became intimidated by his overwhelming presence and quickly paid and left. Yuya recalled that a similar incident had happened a few days earlier, realizing he had inadvertently used magic. Mizusaki anxiously asked if he was all right, apologizing for not being able to stand up for him, but he reassured her, making up an excuse that he was wet and needed to go clean himself up. She misunderstood again, thinking he had been in an accident, causing Yuya to panic and explain that it wasn't the case. Domoni also pointed to the puddle on the floor, thinking it was his. Yuya realized that his abilities and powers were useful, but accidentally using magic could lead to embarrassing or troublesome situations. He found life in this world sometimes quite a headache. At the same time, deep within a mountain, a dragon awakens and calls the seemingly ordinary young man Master. Yuya returned to his daily routine of studying and working alone in his room. Looking at the holy sword the king had given him, he wondered what to do with it, having forgotten to return it before leaving this world. He reasoned that the world would be peaceful for a while after defeating the demon lord and the evil god, although some other formidable demons still remained. He thought the sword would be useless in Japan, so he decided to find a way to return it. With this thought in mind, Yuya went into the forest and remembered that there was a way to return the sword, although he wasn't sure if the recipient would be willing. Find a suitable place. He recalled how he had used summoning magic to conjure the shadow wolf in the room, and then sent it back to the other world. He believed that if he sent the holy sword along with the familiar creature, it might return to the kingdom. Hopefully they'll agree if you ask carefully. He chanted a spell to summon Raylia. The air swirls up as the spell begins to take effect, and then a giant black dragon appeared before Yuya. He was surprised because it had been a long time since he last saw it. And I apologize for calling so abruptly. The creature recognized Yuya, wondering if something was wrong, thinking he had returned to his own world. Raylia was surprised to find herself in Yuya's world. She never imagined he could summon her to another world using only his magic. But without wasting time, Raylia got straight to the point and asked Yuya what he needed. She also noted that she didn't think he had summoned her solely for a private meeting, though that wouldn't have been a problem. Yuya confirmed. In his confusion, he asked her to take an item back to the palace. He remembered that Raylia usually avoided contact with humans and disliked visiting the palace. Since Raylia was a familiar creature to him, exchanging information would be easier through summoning. That's why he asked for my help, not gave me an order. Raylia replied that she didn't mind his request as long as it came from him, but she wanted a condition in return. She wanted to see with her own eyes the mythical world he had come to. Yuya agreed, but it pointed out that she couldn't go around in her dragon form. Instantly, Raylia transformed into a beautiful woman with a captivating figure. This made Yuya blush and reluctantly agree that this form was acceptable. But he warned her not to reveal anything about the other world, because people in Japan were unaware of its existence. Raylia was very excited when she saw the motorbike. I feel delighted with the smooth, flat roads of this world. She even hugged Yuya tightly as the car sped away. Enjoy the new experience. Yuya explained that they compensate for the lack of magic with advanced science. He admitted that he himself didn't fully understand magic when he was in the other world. Raylia nodded in agreement, captivated by the food of this world. She jokingly, half-seriously said she would be willing to destroy an entire country just to get a glass of parfait. When Yuya reminded him that he was just a penniless student, she suggested he sell one of his scales or a claw. However, upon learning that they had no value in this world, she was disappointed and saddened by the prospect of not being able to eat any more sweets. Angry, Yuya dragged Raylia outside, that he still had to go to school in the afternoon. Surprisingly, Raylia announced that she would go with him. Or, if she wasn't allowed, she would explore the city on her own. Fearing that Raylia would bankrupt him with sweets, Yuya reluctantly agreed to let her come along. At the university, Raylia was amazed by the size of the building, exclaiming that it was large enough to house an entire town full of students. When the receptionist asked for their ID cards, Yuya panicked. But Raylia quickly produced a membership card from the other world. Surprisingly, the receptionist accepted without asking any questions. This astonished Yuya. He whispered that he didn't know membership cards from the other world were accepted here. But Raylia just laughed and revealed that she had used magic to make the staff see what she wanted them to see. Yuya praised her for her quick wit, put the guest tag on her, and was about to take her on a tour. Just then, Akane appeared. He gave a cold laugh and asked who the woman accompanying him was. It sent chills down Yuya's spine. In response to Akane's question, Raylia casually referred to Yuya as Master, and asked him to introduce them. This made Akane even more terrifying. Quick-witted, Yuya said that Raylia was an acquaintance of his father and called him Master because she wasn't fluent in Japanese. Akane stepped forward to greet Raylia, surprised to learn that Yuya had spoken about her several times before. She went on to say that Yuya had once told her they had a relationship. Unfortunately, they were inseparable from each other since high school, and that she wasn't a very good companion. Those words displeased Raylia somewhat. Sensing danger, Yuya panicked and tried to flee to the classroom, but Akane quickly grabbed his shoulder and said she wanted to go with him. She even knew his class schedule. Akane didn't miss the opportunity, giving Raylia a tour of the school, not giving her a single moment to talk privately with Yuya. Lost in thought, Yuya was suddenly pulled back to reality when a classmate named Akio appeared, asked about the pretty girl, and suggested they get to know each other. Yuya tried to stop him. But Akio, a third-year law student and senior in the travel club, wasn't easily dismissed. Akio is famous for repeating the school year because he's too busy traveling. As Raylia and Akane approached, Yuya introduced Akio as someone who seemed shallow but was actually kind-hearted. Without hesitation, Akio began to flirt with Raylia, praising her as unparalleled. Akane coldly interrupted, asking him who he was comparing her to. At that moment, a rugby club member named Ijima tried to join the conversation, but Akio rudely told him to stay away from Raylia. This angered Ijima, and he demanded a fight. Yuya tried to defuse the situation, but Ijima grabbed him by the collar and told him to leave. Instead of being scared, Yuya just laughed, comparing him to a cute hamster defending its territory. Raylia suddenly butted in, hurling insults at Ijima. Before grabbing his face, lifting him into the air, and coldly asking him what he intended to do with her master, she demanded. Then she dropped Ijima with a chilling warning, making him look like he'd just encountered a formidable final boss. Yuya approached to check on Ijima's condition, and a cold warning to never act arrogant again, scaring him away. Akane asks what happened, and who Raylia really is. Yuya replied that she was stronger than most people. Then he quickly said goodbye to Akio. He was trying to get Raylia's number and quickly bring her home. Although Yuya only intended to give Raylia a brief introduction to Japan before returning to his mission of returning the Holy Sword, he had anticipated that things would become this complicated. Reluctantly, he invited her into the house, but Raylia asked if she was really allowed in. And she wanted a chance to greet his family, whispering that if anything happened, she would use magic to resolve it. When Yuya opened the door, he was shocked to see his younger sister, Ayumi, holding a banner welcoming Raylia. He explained that his best friend, Akane, had given him advance notice of the visit. Ayumi also revealed that she had informed their mother that guests would be visiting. Yuya introduced Raylia to his mother. Someone had prepared mamali and ice cream, which Raylia enjoyed. Then Ayumi led Raylia into the bathroom, where the three girls happily took a bath together. Meanwhile, Yuya, sitting outside, listened to everything with a mixture of confusion and embarrassment. That night, Yuya collapsed onto his bed, exhausted after a long day, and wondered if Raylia would be okay being around the girls. In the next room, Akane directly questioned Raylia about her relationship with Yuya. Raylia replied that they had a soul connection, but that didn't mean they were romantically involved. Akane jumped up with joy. But Raylia quickly added that she still understood Yuya's attractiveness as a man, causing Akane to involuntarily shiver. Ayumi asked Raylia if she liked her older brother. After a moment of hesitation, Raylia replied that she liked him, but wasn't sure exactly how she felt. Ayumi then turned to Akane and asked if Raylia was a rival of hers. But before Akane could answer, Raylia turned back and asked about her relationship with Yuya. Akane, confused, replied that they were just friends. But when Raylia casually asked if they had slept together, Akane was flustered, muttering unspoken confessions and unable to give a clear answer. Ayumi, while playing around, declared that she would test Raylia's character and smiled, telling the girls to go easy on her. Meanwhile, Yuya was worried in the next room that Raylia may have revealed something she shouldn't have. Unable to sleep due to anxiety, he opened Ayumi's room door to check on her but was interrupted by all three girls. They all shouted for him to leave and slammed the door shut. Back in bed, Yuya tried to divert his thoughts from the mission to return the holy sword. Raylia recalled her first encounter with Yuya when it felt like someone was calling her from inside a cave. Having become accustomed to going long periods without a visitor, she often spent her time sleeping, until 2 years ago. As life gradually returned to peace, Raylia felt bored and depressed. She had left her cave 2 years ago and had only returned 2 months ago, but for a creature as long-lived as she was, that time felt like a fleeting dream. It all started when Yuya and his teammates appeared in the cave while she was fast asleep. Raylia disliked humans because of their greed and warlike tendencies. She warned Yuya's group that if they didn't leave, they would die at her hands. Raylia harbors no hatred towards them, but if they attempt to disrupt her peace, she will not hesitate to retaliate. However, undeterred, Yuya approached and, "Please lend them your strength to protect the country and its people from the Demon King." Raylia refused. Because she believed that both humans and demons were the same kind of creatures, she didn't want to interfere in their conflict. But Yuya didn't give up once again. He proposed a bet. He asked Raylia to give him a challenge that wasn't too impossible or too long, and if he loses, he will accept all of her conditions. If she wins, she must lend them her power. The cave shook as Raylia burst into loud laughter. She asked him what his purpose was. Yuya replied that he only wanted to return to his old world after being summoned by the goddess Valinus. Raylia realized that Yuya, being from another world, had no reason to concern himself with the troubles of this world. Yuya admitted that he had many grievances against Valinus. "But you won't be able to return to a smile if you abandon the people you met at Wilterius." After some thought, Raylia agreed, and demanded that Yuya use his strength to subdue her by force. She needs to acknowledge him as her temporary owner before she'll be willing to help. Tia was worried and begged Yuya to choose a different challenge, but he only smiled, drew his sword, and asked Raylia to go easy on him. A battle ensued between them, even though she disliked humans. Raylia was still impressed by Yuya's unwavering gaze, his refusal to back down. Regardless of the power difference between them, he attacked relentlessly, pushing himself beyond his limits. Even though he couldn't defeat her, Yuya never gave up. Raylia was impressed by his perseverance, and she eventually accepted defeat, acknowledging Yuya as her master for a brief period. With unwavering determination and ever-improving skills, Yuya earned Raylia's trust. Perhaps she wanted to see how far he would go, or perhaps she sensed the fragility within him. But she was curious anyway about what Yuya would show her in the future. Back in the present, Raylia thanks Akane and Ayumi for the fun time they had together. Yuya was quite surprised to see that she had passed everything without any problems. The farewell was merely a formality, as Raylia couldn't return to the other world unless Yuya brought her back. They decided to meet again on the mountain where he had summoned her, and Yuya instructed her not to stop at any restaurants along the way. As they said goodbye, Raylia unexpectedly approached and planted a kiss on Yuya's lips. This left him blushing and embarrassed, while she smiled teasingly at Akane before leaving. Yuya was confused, not understanding why she kissed him, but Akane noticed the cheerful smile on his face and began to chase after him. This caused Yuya to flee. Meanwhile, in another world, Raylia soared through the forest in dragon form. She headed towards the capital to carry out the mission Yuya had assigned her. She chuckled as she recalled their last meeting. When he unexpectedly asked why she kissed him, especially after Ayumi and Akane had gotten angry and chased after him, Raylia, surprised, asked if he didn't like the kiss. When Yuya was about to explain, he finally gave up and said that it was no longer important. Then he gave Raylia a box full of parfait. He revealed that he bought them because he knew she liked them so much. Raylia happily embraced him, pressing his face against her chest, almost suffocating him. Suddenly, Yuya asked if she intended to kill him. Raylia just giggled, playfully touching her breasts. She smiled, saying she definitely had to repay the gift, but Yuya quickly said it wasn't necessary and asked her to simply bring the holy sword back to the palace. He pulled the sword from his magic box and added several desserts for Mel and her friends, asking Raylia to deliver the message and the gifts. She also placed these items in her own storage. They joked that they would probably be talking about Yuya over those desserts. Before he could take her back to her old world, Raylia asked him to summon her at least once a month. Yuya admitted that he would miss her, which made Raylia happy. Meanwhile, back in the capital, Princess Malthuria sat at her desk, sighing as she looked at the pile of documents before her. She stepped out onto the balcony to enjoy the cool breeze until she saw a figure approaching from the sky. After a while, Malthuria finally realized it was the Black Dragon. She was surprised to see it here. Raylia landed in the palace courtyard and quickly transformed back into human form, with both Princess Malthuria and Prince Leon rushing to greet her. Raylia coldly told the prince that she had come to fulfill a request from her master, but her eyes immediately softened when she saw Malthuria. Ignored, Leon trudged away. Leaving her younger sister to handle Raylia's request, I'm a little jealous of the close relationship between Mel and the dragon. When Mel asked Raylia about this change, she recounted that she was there at Yuya's request. And without thinking twice, he drew the holy sword from his inventory and threw it at a surprised guard. Mel, still confused, asked Raylia to wait a moment before leaving. Then, Mel asked if Raylia had met Yuya, and the dragon replied that she had been summoned by Yuya, and that he had taken her on a tour of his world. A place she found extremely interesting. The princess tried to process this information as Tia. The heiress, the maid, appeared with a captivated gaze and bowed to the dragon. I suggested they sit and talk in the garden. Raylia happily invited Mel to join them and revealed that she had brought souvenirs as well. Tia was delighted to see Raylia and approached her in her maid's outfit. They greeted each other warmly. Then he turned to look at the princess, who was still standing there like a statue. Tia approached Mel, gently saying that it would likely take a while for the princess to return to reality. Then he pulled out a slipper from somewhere and hit the princess on the back of the head. Princess Malthuria jolted from her reverie, looking around in confusion and wondering what had just happened, just like the slipper that appeared out of nowhere while she noticed a slight headache. Tia, the maid, evaded the question. At that moment, Mel saw Raylia and remembered her words about meeting Yuya. This surprised Tia. Raylia promised to tell the details, then took a dessert box from her storage. Princess Tia and Tia were captivated by the parfait cakes. Raylia offered them a taste, and when they took a bite, both were captivated by the delicious taste of this dessert. Tia even wondered if it could be recreated in the kingdom. Although Mel mentioned making dessert for her brother and father, the three of them ultimately decided to eat it all themselves because both of them were busy. The princess could hardly believe that Yuya could summon dragons from another world, while Tia wished she could be bound to Yuya through a contract. Raylia explained that this was supposed to be impossible. But perhaps it's because Yuya is special, or maybe Valienis intervened for some reason. Raylia believes the goddess might be planning to use Yuya for other purposes. But she was determined to stop the goddess from disrupting Yuya's peaceful life any further. Although not a goddess, Raylia possesses immense power, and can sense if anything happens to Yuya thanks to their contract. Mel shyly asked if they could see Yuya again. Raylia replied that it was quite possible. She explained that when a summoner summons a spirit beast with whom they have made a contract, there are instances where the summoned spirit beast is accompanied by other spirit beasts at the time of summoning. Furthermore, Yuya promised to summon her at least once a month. Tia was overjoyed at the prospect of seeing Yuya again. Mel, on the other hand, almost burst into tears of happiness. When Eris said that the princess would have a chance to see Yuya again, Mel denied it. But she became even more confused when the maid pointed out that she had never mentioned Yuya's name. Raylia laughed and asked the princess why she had to deny her feelings when everyone knew she loved him. Mel denied it once again. But Eris reminded her that whenever she thought of Yuya, she would giggle and blush at the mention of his name. Raylia reassured Tia that she would ask Yuya to take them both to visit once things settled down, which only made Tia more excited. But when they returned, they found Mel had fainted after realizing her true feelings for Yuya. Despite her duties as a princess, Tia frantically tried to wake Mel up. Meanwhile, Eris merely chuckled with amusement at the princess's embarrassment. Meanwhile, Yuya was facing financial difficulties. Once a hero summoned to another world to defeat demons and evil gods, he now faces financial difficulties upon his return to his own world. Yuya walked over to his mother and gave her a necklace that he had made himself. He lied, saying he learned how to do it online. His mother was overjoyed to receive the gift, After fighting for survival for 3 years in another world, Yuya finally returned to Japan. Although he imagined life back would be full of joy, he soon realized that everything here required money. With his part-time job's salary insufficient to live on, plus the cost of college, Yuya considered using magic to earn money. However, not wanting to get involved in any illegal activities, he decided to use his alchemy abilities to make handmade accessories from the gold and silver in his inventory and sell them online. He recalled the times his mother suffered from shoulder pain and backaches, and imbue the necklace with the ability to recover from fatigue. Although it's not as powerful as mainstream magic, this piece of jewelry still has certain benefits for the wearer. Yuya made a special necklace for his mother, and when his mother happily showed off the new gift to his younger sister Ayumi, the little girl immediately demanded a gift of her own. Yuya smiled and gave her a dog-shaped necklace. Ayumi was very excited about his online sales plan. "I offer to help you design a website." Yuya happily agreed, promising to share a portion of the profits with her. Yuya's mother was delighted by the brothers' cooperation, reminding them not to forget about their studies. "And could you please bring her lunch to her office next week?" When she had to go to work earlier than usual, Yuya suddenly started thinking more about his business. While at Tokyo General Hospital, here, Nurse Adachi Miyuki complains about her stomach rumbling whenever she's hungry, hoping no one hears her. At that moment, Yuya appeared from behind. "Greeter." Miyuki, accustomed to him bringing lunch to his mother, returned Yuya's greeting and informed him that she had just been called to the infirmary but would be back soon. Miyuki shyly asked if Yuya was making any extra servings. He cheerfully said he had prepared enough simple dishes for 5 people, encouraging her and her colleagues to enjoy them. Nurse Takahashi Kyoko then also approached. He arrived after hearing Miyuki praise his cooking skills. And then Nurse Ayamaron appeared, unable to hide her excitement. Miyuki suggested waiting until Yuya's mother returned so the whole group could eat together. Yuya took the opportunity to display some of his handmade accessories. To ask for your opinion, the nurses all thought they were adorable, especially when Kyoko recognized the necklace that her mother had shown her off a few days earlier. Kyoko praised Yuya's craftsmanship, saying that the items didn't look like handmade crafts at all. Yuya happily offered them whichever dish they liked best. When he turned around, he saw a girl standing at the door, observing. The little girl immediately ran away when their eyes met. He left him and the nurses happily choosing accessories. Miyuki approached and asked what was wrong when she heard him mention that girl. Miyuki revealed that the girl's name was Mia, 10 years old, and she had just been transferred from the pediatrics department to their ward due to some special circumstances. Ron added that Mia was very frail, so it was dangerous for her to wander around alone. Yuya decided to go look for the little girl. After a while, Yuya found Mia sitting alone on a bench outside the hospital. He greeted them and said that the nurses were looking for the little girl. Mia asked him who he was, and Yuya introduced himself as the son of a nurse, reiterating that they had met in the nurses' station, and simultaneously asked Mia to go back inside. Mia firmly refused and appeared sulky. To cheer her up, Yuya offered to show her something interesting. If she agrees to return to her room afterward, Mia finally agreed after a moment of hesitation. Yuya raised his hand and told Mia to look at his fingertips. Then he created small fireballs that illuminated the night before, disappearing when he snapped his fingers. Mia was amazed and asked Yuya how he did it. He just smiled, refused to reveal the secret, and said it was a secret because he couldn't tell the little girl that it was real magic. The little girl wanted to see a few more magic tricks, but Yuya refused because it was late. He promised her that he would show her something even more amazing if Mia was well-behaved and listened to the nurses. The little girl asked him to promise, and they both kept their promise by linking fingers. A few days later, Yuya returned to the hospital. The nurses were startled to see him appear at just the right moment. She kept asking about the accessories he gave her the other day and whether he had made them himself. Yuya was stunned, secretly worried that something might have gone wrong because he had used materials from another world, or perhaps made a mistake in the crafting process. But instead, the nurses excitedly reported feeling energized and that their back pains had disappeared. One person also reported that their skin looked smoother. Yuya felt relieved to hear that, and explained that he had made it from ordinary silver and a special type of crystal. However, the girls remained skeptical, and one even joked that perhaps Yuya was the one with the magic. Yuya chuckled awkwardly, joking that he had wished each item could bring good luck to the wearer when he crafted it. Then he asked the nurses about Mia's room. When he remembered that he had once taken the little girl back to her room, the nurses asked if he had any special relationship with Mia. Yuya talked about his promise to the little girl. This helped the nurses understand the reason. The little girl became much more well-behaved. which the nurses greatly appreciated and thanked Yuya for his help. Yuya then asked why Mia had been transferred from the pediatrics department to the surgery department. But the nurses only revealed that Mia had argued with another child. And to avoid negatively impacting the girl's mental health, they decided to move her to another area. When Miyuki was called away, Yuya continued towards Mia's room. Then he came across a little boy standing at the door, which surprised him. Yuya asked if he had any business with Mia, but the boy tried to leave. Yuya quickly grabbed him and lifted him under his arm. Take them to the waiting room to talk. Yuya offered the boy a glass of water, and asked the question again only to be called uncle. Even though they are only university students, Yuya correctly guessed that this was the boy who had argued with Mia and asked for her name. The boy introduced himself as Ichinose Yu and admitted that he had said unkind things to Mia. Through the conversation, Yuya learned that Mia's parents rarely visited her because of their busy work schedules, and she would often look on with envy when she saw the parents of other children come to visit. On one such occasion, when Yu's mother brought him a new manga, Mia got angry and threw the teddy bear at the boy. Feeling hurt, Yu angrily stated that Mia's parents didn't visit because of her attitude. Yu's mother was very angry with him for those words, and Yu felt remorse. The boy really wanted to apologize to Mia, but she had been moved away before he had a chance. Even though Yu knew where Mia was, he still didn't have the courage to go and meet her. Hearing this, Yuya offered to help and lifted Yu up. Bring the boy to Mia's room. Mia was sitting on her bed reading a book, her face brightening when she saw Yuya walk in, but she was surprised to see him with her. Yuya gently urged the boy, and after a moment of hesitation, Yuya bowed her head and apologized to Mia for what she had said. The two children looked at each other in silence. That was until Mia's mother, Uno Ayako, walked into the room, surprised to see Yuya and Yu there. Yuya introduced himself and Yu, explaining that he wanted to apologize, and he also came to fulfill his promise. The mother revealed that because the argument started with Mia throwing things at Yu, she had planned to go to the boy's house to apologize. Looking at her daughter, she gently reminded Mia to apologize to Yu to put an end to everything. After everything was settled, Ayako introduced herself as Uno Ayako. Mia eagerly urged Yuya to perform the magic trick he had promised. Yuya told Yu and Uno to sit down and watch together. When everyone is settled, he began creating fireballs that flew around the room. It astonished everyone. Then he poured water into a small bowl. Then scoop it up and let it float. Then, unexpectedly, he splashed water on Yu, making the little girls giggle. Next, he made paper cranes that flew through the air. And then he asked Mia about her favorite animal. Mia happily replied that it was a giant sea cockroach. Surprised by the answer, Yuya asked the little girl to choose a different animal. And Mia chose a naked mole. Her mother reminded Mia to choose a more normal animal. In the end, Mia chose the kitten. Yuya took a bead and a handkerchief out of his pocket and asked Mia to examine them closely. He used his transformation skills from a box of items in another world. Then pulled the towel away, revealing a sparkling kitten-shaped necklace. Mia was surprised and delighted, and Yuya gave the little girl the bracelet. He continued to do the same thing to Yu, and gave the boy a necklace with a dove pendant. Finally, he made a similar gift for Ayako. Although she initially hesitated because she thought the gift was too expensive, she reluctantly accepted the valuable gift from Yuya. But he reassured her that it wouldn't cost much, and encouraged her to wear it with Mia because they matched well and looked beautiful together. Seeing the joyful expression on her daughter's face, Ayako agreed. Actually, Yuya made these pieces of jewelry especially for Mia. They added a magic spell to ward off illness so that both Mia and her mother could wear them as a matching pair, helping Mia feel less lonely. As she left the room, Ayako thanked Yuya for doing something so wonderful for Mia. She commented that his magic trick was very impressive. This almost made her believe it was real magic. Yuya just chuckled, secretly thinking that he had probably used too much magic in front of everyone. Ayako said this was her first time. Since Mia got sick, she's been so happy. Yuya noticed that Uno also seemed healthier thanks to the healing magic he had cleverly placed in the room. It helps her feel more energetic. Although using magic in the modern world might be considered cheating, Yuya is happy to see that his power can help others. He hopes this will help Mia get better. Before parting ways, Uno suggested that Yuya visit Mia after her surgery, and he happily agreed. Elsewhere, an armed group is finalizing preparations for an assassination mission against an ambassador, equipped with a range of heavy weaponry. One of them confirmed that the diplomat's schedule was proceeding as planned, while one member of the assassination team complained that the preparations had taken more effort than expected for a nation supposedly exhausted by peace. Their leader reminded them that their goal was to negotiate, as the ambassador's country had many allies in Africa and the Middle East. He warned his subordinates against causing unnecessary deaths. But the henchmen seemed unconcerned, believing they could eliminate anyone they deemed necessary, and that the deadly cult followers meant nothing to them. The leader then announced that the mission would begin at 11 p.m. the following night, targeting the ambassador and officials of the Japanese government. Meanwhile, after many hours of hard work, a boy happily announced that the design he had created himself, was finally completed. Yuya tries on the Henjin hero costume that he made, and he commented that it suited Yuya very well. This is part of Yuya's part-time cosplay job. And the boy admitted that he had to adjust the costumes quite a bit because Yuya's physique had changed so much. He enthusiastically asked Yuya to perform the signature rider kick to attract attention. That boy is Saito Yosuke, an otaku specializing in tokusatsu and a science student at the same university as Yuya. He hired Yuya to be a cosplayer for the big annual summer/winter cosplay event. Yosuke was very excited and promised a generous reward. Short on money after Raelia's visit, and with Ayumi and Akane also demanding fair treatment, Yuya agrees to take on this job, despite the embarrassment and awkwardness to save up for motorcycle training camp that will start during the summer break. While they rest, Yuya turns on the TV, and at that moment Saito asked him about Raylia after hearing about her from Ayumi. Yuya replied that his sister had gone with Akane to the Persian art exhibition. And immediately the news reported an explosion at the museum, where armed gunmen from abroad stormed in, taking the ambassador and several government officials hostage and holding themselves captive inside the building. Saito was shocked to realize that it was the same museum where Ayumi had attended the exhibition. After failing to reach his sister by phone, Yuya also saw the news and feared the worst. Aware of the dangerous situation, he used magic to locate Ayumi and Akane inside the museum. He was determined to save them if necessary. However, to keep his powers a secret, he realized he needed a disguise. Immediately, he used magic to put Saito to sleep so he could borrow his cosplay costume. At the museum, the terrorist group warned everyone to keep quiet. Meanwhile, Ayumi and Akane were also in the crowd. Akane tried to reassure Ayumi that help would arrive soon, and deep down she still hoped Yuya would be there, even though she thought he probably couldn't do much in the situation. Meanwhile, former hero Yuya flew towards the museum, unable to use his teleportation ability, concealing oneself using the Inhibit Perception spell, and using disguise to hide one's identity. He was floating above the museum. He could sense everyone's location in the building, and quickly identified Ayumi thanks to the magic necklace she was wearing. Thinking about his next move, Yuya realized that invisibility wouldn't work on the vigilant terrorists, and he'd never learned stealth skills. Those were for spies or criminals, not a hero like him. With no other options, he decided to use his strength. First, Yuya searches for bombs. I found one in the park, and immediately covered it with a time barrier to prevent the explosion, much to the astonishment of the surrounding people. After returning to the air, he located the gunman and the hostages. Yuya initiated the attack by taking down a guard at the entrance, and quickly knocked him unconscious. Moving further into the building, he erected sound barriers on each floor to prevent noise from spreading. Then they took down each terrorist one by one. When a terrorist is spotted pointing a gun into the child who is protecting his mother, the terrorist shot the child, just so his bullet would be deflected by a force field. Yuya lunged forward and bent the barrel of his gun, and knocked him down immediately. He patted the boy's head gently and offered a few reassuring words. Everyone was surprised to see a hero in costume rescuing them. Yuya then informed the hostages that he had cleared a safe path for them to escape. Yuya quickly waved goodbye to the last of the hostages as they left the building. Then he went in to finish things. The 3 remaining terrorists are on guard. Approximately 100 hostages, including the ambassador. Seeing them recklessly raid such a large facility with so few people, Yuya suspected they had some kind of plan. When he discovered a hostage right next to the terrorists in a mysterious bag, he realized it wasn't a bomb. Unable to wait any longer, Yuya decided to charge in. The first terrorist was caught by surprise when Yuya used magic to disarm his 2 accomplices. Then he continued to take him down with a powerful rider kick. The other 2 were shocked to discover their weapons were ineffective. One of them managed to dodge the blow, but the other was knocked to the floor. The terrorist finally pulled out his detonator and pressed the button, but nothing happened. While he was confused, Yuya quickly used magic to knock him unconscious. He then checked on the ambassador's situation, lower the barricade around him so that bodyguards can protect the ambassador. Yuya announced that he had dealt with the terrorists and evacuated the hostages, advising everyone to leave the building. Once Akane and Ayumi were confirmed safe, the younger sister looked at him suspiciously but reassured herself. Yuya felt relieved to see that his clothes were still concealing his identity. When the last hostages had left, a Special Forces police officer, Barjan, he approached and asked if he was the one who took down the terrorists. Yuya refused to reveal his identity, and the warning about the 2 bombs had been diffused by him. Then, using magic, he made them appear in his hand. Yuya tried to reassure the police as they hid behind their shields, explaining that he had wrapped them in a barrier and destroyed the triggers, then asked where he could put them down. The officers were confused and told him to wait. After a while, they thanked him for his cooperation and asked him to accompany them to the police station. Yuya made an excuse and disappeared, much to their astonishment. Leave the task of reporting the crime scene to the police. He teleported to Saito's house, where he had left a magic circle as a precaution. Seeing his friend still fast asleep, he checked his clothes for any damage and quickly put everything back in its original place. Despite feeling a little embarrassed, Yuya was happy that he could wear the outfit to the museum. However, this is in stark contrast to his confident demeanor when dressed as a hero. Returning home, Yuya pondered that using magic in such a way might leave another dark stain on his history. He decided to go to sleep. Tia asked Malthuria, let her join the battle, but she was refused and told that the war had nothing to do with her. Instead, the princess sent her to find Raylia and monsters for the benefit of the country and those who care in Japan. But the next morning, Ayumi patiently knocked on his door to wake him up. Reluctantly getting out of bed, Yuya realized his embarrassing past was now a mental burden. He thought the heist in the hero costume would end there, but he was completely wrong. The media quickly flooded with stories about the mysterious hero. And that's because the TV in the house was always on. Yuya was forced to listen to embarrassing stories about the mysterious hero he had impersonated. Every time he saw him on screen, he maintained a calm expression, but inwardly he wanted to sink into the ground to hide. He recalled the silly heroic poses he had performed, and I just hope everything will be over soon. A week after the event, Yuya met his sister in the living room, while the news program was showing footage of the hero on the screen. Ayumi looked closely and said that the hero looked very much like Yuya. She asked if he was the hero. He denied it, claiming that he was at Saito's house at the time and couldn't have flown to the museum. She teased him, saying it would take him another decade to become a wizard, and also reminded him that he was still single. Just then, Yuya's phone rang, reminding him that it had been almost a month since he last summoned Raylia. When Ayumi asked him if he needed anything, Yuya said Raylia's coming soon. Dissatisfied, Ayumi asked if she would be staying there any longer. Yuya suddenly realized he had stepped on a landmine. A little while later, Raylia appeared and smiled, saying that he had kept his promise. Yuya asked her about the sacred sword, and she confirmed that she had returned it. Suddenly, Tia appeared and hugged Yuya tightly. Her scent astonished him. Raylia recounts that after returning the sword, she told Mel and Tia about her encounter with Yuya, and Tia insisted on going to see him. Yuya was worried. If Tia stayed too long, it would cause a lot of trouble. Tia shyly asked if she could stay, but Yuya pointed out that her animal ears and tail would draw attention in a world without beastmen, and that she would have to register as a resident. However, she could still stay in their house. Yuya realized that Tia couldn't be kept locked up in the house forever, so Raylia suggested that magic could be used to change her appearance. Tia expressed that she didn't want to bother Yuya and that just seeing him again made her happy. Hearing this, Yuya asked Raylia to hide Tia's animal ears and tail. This made the little girl extremely happy. Raylia transforms into her human form and prepares to cast a spell on Tia, warning that it might feel a little strange at first. After using the spell, Tia's animal ears and tail disappeared, leaving her looking like an ordinary girl. Tia touched her new round ears and where her tail used to be, happily remarking that she now had ears just like Yuya's. Look at the hole in Tia's old tail on her clothes. Yuya offered to buy her a new outfit. On her first car ride, Tia thoroughly enjoyed the smooth ride. When the car is driving on the road, while Raylia compared it to riding a motorbike, Yuya, on the other hand, imagined riding in a horse-drawn carriage in the other world. Tia went to the clothing store and tried on a few new outfits, and Yuya thought she looked great in them. Despite finding the fabric quite thin and unsure if it would protect her, Tia was overjoyed to wear the dress from the world of heroes, clinging to it with happiness. Meanwhile, Raylia looked at Tia with envious eyes. After that, the three of them continued strolling around the shopping mall. Yuya stopped to enjoy some parfaits before heading back home. On the way home, Yuya tried to repeat the fabricated story they had all to follow to explain why Raylia and Tia were able to stay with him. At the same time, they kept Raylia's magic a secret as a backup plan in case anyone became suspicious. Despite being very worried, Yuya reassured himself before opening the door and going inside. As the door opened, Yuya was surprised to see his younger sister, Ayumi, standing there with a serious expression on her face. Ayumi looked over Yuya in astonishment, discovering he was with two beautiful girls. And she couldn't help but suspect that her brother might have kidnapped them. Nevertheless, Ayumi invited all three into her house. Tia, out of curiosity, asked about Ayumi, and Yuya explained that she was his younger sister, asking her to leave Ayumi alone. He avoided Ayumi's questions and simply observed as the two friends from the other world talked to her. That evening, while washing dishes, Yuya breathed a sigh of relief that dinner had gone smoothly without incident, although Ayumi was still a little sulky. Then Raylia and Tia came out of the bathroom thanking him for preparing dinner. Yuya invited them both to enjoy a cup of tea while his younger sister took a bath. When he was left alone with his two friends from another world, Yuya decided to ask them directly about Tia's real reason for coming here, suspecting that beyond a simple desire to visit Earth, there might be something more. Tia was flustered and shocked when he mentioned Melthuria. Asked why Tia left without telling Mel. Finally, under pressure from Yuya, Raylia reluctantly admitted that Melthuria had asked Tia to come here. Because I wanted to protect her. Yuya was stunned by that answer and turned completely pale. When Tia revealed that the Velza Empire had declared war on the Ariana's kingdom. The Velza Empire lies to the west of the kingdom, and despite being relatively new, possesses a powerful army. Since the Demon King's expansion, the empire has become greedy, constantly seeking to seize more land and frequently engaging in conflicts with neighboring nations. However, in the recent war against the demons, they cooperated to protect the continent. Tia recounted that 20 days prior, the Empire had invaded the Kingdom of Arianas with a force of 60,000 troops and quickly captured many villages and cities. The Kingdom of Arianas refused to surrender and appealed for help from neighboring countries, but due to the devastation from the war against the Demon King, these nations were unable to muster enough strength to stop the Empire's advance. The Arianas Empire and the Alliance of Eastern Cities advised the kingdom to evacuate. In response, Melthuria requested Tia to flee to Raylia. Yuya felt that the Empire declaring war so soon after the war with the Demon King was premature. While the continent was still in ruins, he speculated that if they could have attacked 20 days earlier, the Empire had probably begun preparations as soon as the war ended, or even deliberately waiting for the right moment to attack, when everyone was still exhausted after the battle with the demons. This thought enraged him so much that Raylia had to sternly tell him to calm down. After Yuya apologized, Tia confessed that they had decided not to tell him about the situation to avoid upsetting him. Turning to Raylia, he asked if she could take him back to Ariana Grande. But when Raylia flatly refused, Yuya explained that he only wanted to know if it was possible and wasn't asking for her help. Raylia seriously asked Yuya what he would do if he knew about it, emphasizing that this was a war between humans and he shouldn't get involved. She understood that he was worried about Melthuria and the others, but she advised him to keep his distance to avoid unnecessary trouble. The conversation was interrupted when Ayumi entered the room, asking if everyone was arguing. Yuya reassured his sister and offered her a cup of tea. However, Raylia unexpectedly interrupted, and jokingly said that Yuya refused to sleep with her, causing Ayumi to immediately call her brother a coward. Tia joined the conversation, and the three girls quickly overwhelmed Yuya, turning the discussion into playful banter. After the story ended, Yuya lay on his bed thinking about the situation. He admitted that the war between humans had nothing to do with an outsider like himself. However, he still couldn't shake off his worries about the fate of Melthuria and the Kingdom of Arianas. Besides that, he was also hesitant about whether he should give up the peaceful life he had just regained in Japan if he decided to return to the other world. Despite hating his hesitation, Yuya began to think about how to return to that world. He realized that Tia was able to come here thanks to her connection with Raylia, who had helped summon her. He believed that with a little experimentation, he could repeat this for himself. However, the challenge lies in how to bring someone back from Japan on his own, since the goddess herself had brought him back last time after completing a mission. Yuya has an untested idea on how to do that. But he understood that if the plan succeeded, he would have to prepare himself for what was to come. Yuya is having a good time while playing with Akani's dog Elizabeth in the park. Akani remarked that he was full of energy even in the early morning. That day, Yuya decided to go for a morning walk with her. And although he had often seen her and her dog when he was training, this time he had a clear objective. Akane, somewhat jealous, asked if he was really okay being here with her, while Raylia was at home with his younger sister, Ayumi. Yuya replied nervously that Ayumi was showing Raylia around the city. The girl reluctantly gave in and went to buy drinks. When only Yuya and Elizabeth were left, he promised Elizabeth some dried meat if the dog would follow him for a little while. That evening, Yuya arranged to meet Raylia and Tia in the park. Upon arrival, he announced that he intended to return to Wiltirias to intervene in the war. Although he acknowledged that Raylia was right about him being just an outsider, he still felt there were too many friends and benefactors in the kingdom whom he couldn't abandon. Whatever the Empire's plans were, he couldn't sit idly by and leave them to fend for themselves. Raylia paused for a moment, then asked if he was really serious. She reminded him that he had sacrificed so much to return to Japan, yet now he wanted to go back to the battlefield. She wondered if there was any way he could get back if things went wrong. Yuya responded firmly that he planned to return after the war ended quickly, as he needed to get back for his university entrance exams next month. While he couldn't completely quell the war in such a short time, he still hoped to prevent the Empire's invasion before then. Recognizing Yuya's determination, Raylia offered to take his place on this mission, using her power to destroy the Imperial army. Yuya thanked her but refused, explaining that his return was due to his selfishness, and he wanted to join the war because of his own will. Hearing this, Raylia asked Yuya how he planned to return to the other world. Yuya remembered that Tia had come to Japan through her connection with Raylia. He reasoned that he could make a pact with an animal in Japan, then summon it to the other world and travel with it. Therefore, he attempted to make a pact with Elizabeth, and succeeded in summoning the dog, teleporting himself along with Elizabeth. Raylia wasn't entirely convinced yet, but Tia stepped forward. She declared that she only wanted to be by Yuya's side. Although there were important people in the other world that she had to protect, if she had to choose, she would choose Yuya over them. However, if it's possible to help everyone without leaving anyone behind, she wishes to do so. The hero smiled upon hearing this, and after a sigh, Raylia finally agreed to his plan. This made Tia overjoyed, and she hugged Yuya tightly. He reasoned that the best course of action was to leave as soon as possible. He chose to leave immediately after informing his mother and sister that he would be away for a while. In another world, the Aryan army is encamped in the open field. With Prince Leon in command, he concluded that they had anticipated the Empire's movements and had promptly set up an encirclement. General Regan entered the tent, reporting that enemy forces were massing to the west of the meadow and might launch an invasion within a day or two. Deputy Commander Bruno Reg confirmed the number of enemy troops to be as high as 80,000. Provide a detailed description of their force composition. At this moment, a knight announced the presence of General Vistas and Duke Grandes from the Holy Irvania Empire, as well as a delegation from the Federation of City-States. The Crown Prince thanked them for coming, but General Vistas coldly reminded them that if they failed to stop the Empire, they would be the next target. Delegates from the City-State Federation also agreed, bringing all the forces they could mobilize. Regan predicted the attack would take place the following day, and planned a calculated retreat, weakening enemy forces along the route of attack. The Crown Prince felt apprehensive about the disparity in forces and feared being surrounded, but General Vistas bluntly reminded him that it was too late for regrets, and that they could only win if each of their soldiers defeated 3 enemies. Court Sorcerer Ducaron suggested leaving an escape route for Prince Leon in case the battle took a turn for the worse, so that he could continue to lead the nation in the future. Prince Leon replied that the kingdom was safe in the hands of the king and Melthuria, and that he was looking forward to having another brother, so he was determined to fight to the end with his soldiers. The conversation was interrupted by a loud commotion outside, and a soldier rushed into the tent, warning of an approaching magical creature, causing everyone in the camp to stand alert and look outside. No one could tell exactly what was approaching, but as Prince Leon gazed intently toward the horizon, he gradually made out the shape of a dragon. The soldiers began to panic, but to his surprise, Leon recognized Raylia. The black dragon landed just outside the camp, and Leon hurried toward it. He was astonished to see Tia and Melthuria disembarking from Raylia. And it was even more shocking to see Yuya appear full of confidence, declaring that he had arrived just in time. The hero had returned. Going back a bit in time, Ayumi questioned why Yuya left with Raylia and Tia the moment they arrived. His mother asked if this was something he couldn't talk about right now, or if he would tell her when things calmed down. Yuya is actually returning to another world to provide reinforcements in the fight against the Velza Empire, and the two visitors from that world also have to return for the same reason. Although he desperately wants to explain everything to his family, he feels it might be too much. He promises to tell them everything later, and his mother accepted it because he was no longer a child. She only asked that as long as he didn't do anything shameful, everything would be fine. Yuya said he would be back in about a week to prepare for his exams next month. Then he, Raylia, and Tia went into the forest, where they successfully teleported to Raylia's cave in another world. Yuya then told Raylia that he wanted to return to the capital of the kingdom of Arianas. Raylia offered to carry him on her back, but Yuya pointed out that this was a human war, and dragons didn't need to get involved in human conflicts. Raylia simply replied that she was merely assisting her employer as per her contract. And accidentally eliminating enemy soldiers is not a problem. Yuya happily accepted her help. They climbed onto Raylia's back along with Tia, and all three moved to a field near the capital. From there, Raylia spread her wings and flew over the city, leaving the residents below astonished at the sight of the giant dragon soaring through the air. When she landed in the castle courtyard, some guards quickly rushed forward to confront the intruders. But then they gasped in astonishment when they realized the hero had returned. Yuya requested to speak with the king, and the guards immediately stood at attention and hastily fulfilled his request. Princess Malthuria ran along the palace corridors with her heart pounding. I'm eagerly looking forward to reuniting with Yuya. She knocked on the door and then excitedly entered the room where he was waiting. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. Hopefully this isn't a dream. Hero Yuya half-jokingly warned that if she kept squeezing so tightly, her breasts would press against him. But that was ineffective because her physical condition made the warning superfluous and only upset her. Standing behind Malthuria, the maid heiress boldly teased the princess for rushing forward to hug her like that, and Yuya turned to greet the maid. She replied. With a look of anticipation in her eyes, she immediately suggested he perform that ritual with her, even not minding if he wanted to choose the princess before her. Malthuria started a conversation with Yuya, but their conversation was interrupted when a servant came in to announce that the king was ready to receive them. Leaving their conversation unfinished, Malthuria led him into the throne room. As they approached King Arius and Queen Lafia, Yuya knelt down, but the queen immediately ordered him to stand up. The king expressed surprise and joy at seeing the hero return, and then asked the reason for his return. Yuya explains that Tia has come to his world, and thanks to that, he learned about the current situation of the kingdom. Yuya decides to return with Tia to punish the invaders. He intends to join the fight against the Velsa Empire. The entire hall erupted in cheers of excitement upon hearing this. But just as the king was thanking him for his help, Interior Minister Belrias intervened. As the second highest ranking official in the kingdom and trusted by the king, Belrias was always sincere and dedicated, having funded the construction of many orphanages for children who had lost their parents in the war. However, he consistently opposed bringing people from other worlds like Yuya into the kingdom's affairs, leading to many heated arguments between them. Belrias stood up in protest, asserting that the previous time they were forced to accept Yuya's participation in the fight against the evil god was due to the intervention of the goddess. But this time, he didn't think it was wise to involve people from another world. The king noticed the minister's stubbornness, but also pointed out that the war was currently a major threat to the kingdom, and that if the situation continued, they would suffer even more losses. He also emphasized that Yuya had volunteered to help this time. Belrias tried to argue further, but before he could speak, Yuya suddenly appeared from behind and yanked his hair hard. The wig fell off, revealing a shiny bald head. The room was illuminated by the light reflecting from Belrias's head. Yuya made a light-hearted joke about the minister's superb ability to control light, which made the royal family burst into laughter. Belrias stood frozen, his face flushed with embarrassment. Yuya recalled that 2 years ago he had cast a spell on Belriach, causing him to lose a strand of hair every 100 steps, and he had forgotten to break the curse when he left. Defeated by Yuya, Belriace declared that he would not be rewarded despite his contributions to the war, and angrily left the throne room. The king interpreted this as the minister's tacit approval of Yuya's participation in the war. Once this matter was resolved, the king informed Yuya that the kingdom had allied with the Holy Irvania Empire and the League of Free Cities. The combined army had massed east of the eastern Fristal Plain, and the battle is expected to break out in the next few days. The king ordered Yuya to go to the battlefield to support the forces there, and Yuya gladly accepted the order. Malthuria then asked her father for permission to accompany Yuya, despite his initial objections. She was confident that with Yuya's participation they would win. She also emphasized that with the presence of Deputy Captains Reg, Duke Ranz, Tia, and Raylia, the hero team will return, helping to boost the morale of the soldiers. Seeing the benefits of this proposal, the king officially ordered Malthuria to join Yuya and enlist in Leon's army. Yuya is preparing to leave as soon as Malthuria is ready, promising to bring back good news in a few days. The king and queen expressed their deep gratitude for Yuya's tireless help, urging him not to overexert himself. Back in the present, Prince Leon encounters Yuya and his group outside the military camp, surprised to see him and his sister appear. Yuya gave Leon a letter from the king. After quickly reading the letter, Leon decided to leave the questions for later and confirmed that Yuya had joined the fight, expressing gratitude for his presence. He invited Yuya into the command tent to discuss strategy for the upcoming battle. At the command tent, Prince Leon asked Yuya and Raylia if they would mind attending the meeting. Yuya reassured him that Raylia was only there to help him. After things settled down, Yuya asked the prince about the strength of the armies and the strategy they were planning to use. General Regan explained that the enemy had 20,000 heavy cavalry, 15,000 light cavalry, and 40,000 infantry, along with archer units and support forces, a total of 80,000 soldiers, and an unknown number of mages. Meanwhile, the Ariana's kingdom's army numbered 20,000. The Holy Irvania Empire contributed an additional 10,000, and the Alliance of Free Cities provided 5,000 troops, in addition to a volunteer force of 3,000 adventurers. They were facing an army twice their size. Yuya realized that he alone wouldn't be enough to narrow the numerical gap, but the situation wasn't as hopeless as he thought. He wished he could use a large-scale magic spell to wipe out entire enemy forces in a single blow, like in the comics. However, all his training focused on combat skills for boss battles, facing demon kings and evil gods, leaving him lacking the skills to deal with multiple enemies simultaneously. He concluded that the key to victory would lie in the coordination between the allied forces. Leon then announced that, according to reconnaissance reports, the enemy would advance in a crescent formation, with light cavalry on the right flank, heavy cavalry on the left, and infantry in the center, along with support units in the rear. He believed the enemy would attack the center with heavy cavalry, while light cavalry would encircle them from both sides. Infantry would advance, and heavy cavalry on the right flank would deliver the finishing blow. Yuya remarked that this was a typical strategy of a large army, due to the difficulty in moving such a large force. He noted that the ideal approach would be to encircle the enemy, but due to their small numbers, they were unable to do so. He predicted that the enemy would attack in that formation while they held the majority of the battlefield. With this, Yuya realized that his preparations would not be in vain. Leon stated that with Yuya's Jiaru, their strategy was now completely flexible. He asked Yuya to present his plan. Yuya wanted to keep the battle as short as possible to minimize casualties, especially since any casualties would only add more pressure to a country already exhausted after the war with the demons. Duke Ranz looked worriedly at Yuya and asked if he intended to repeat the tactics he had used at Garda Fortress. That fortress was once used by the Demon King as a base for attacks southward, providing a safe staging area for offensive operations. At that time, Yuya made a pact with creatures other than the dragon Raylia and the Shadow Wolf, as a being capable of controlling the smaller animals in the area. Thanks to this, they were able to gather a large swarm of insects. General Vistas recalled that thanks to the creature's power, Yuya had annihilated 10,000 demons, rendering the fortress unusable and terrifying their own army. Ranz shuddered, remarking that it wasn't magic, but the power of the creature Yuya had summoned. However, Yuya explained that he wouldn't be using that method this time because he didn't have enough time and the terrain wasn't suitable. Deputy Captain Reg announced that the adventurer force was being commanded by an A-class team from the kingdom's headquarters. Yuya asked Prince Leon to summon them to prepare for the upcoming plan. After a period of discussion and presentation, Yuya pledged to minimize military casualties while simultaneously dismantling the Imperial Army. However, he also noted that the group of adventurers would bear the heaviest burden of the plan. Reg was concerned about the manpower requirements. General Reagan suggested sending mages to assist the adventurers group so that the Earth mages and builders could complete their preparations before the battle began. General Reagan remarked that the outcome of the battle would depend on whether this strategy succeeded, and suggested that no prior testing was necessary, because he remains optimistic about the outcome. Yuya thanked everyone for their support, explaining that Mel would help him and the group of adventurers. While Raylia was tasked with dealing with the Imperial Light Cavalry, he emphasized that she didn't need to completely annihilate them, just force them to retreat after losing their commander and suffering sufficient losses. He also assigned Tia the task of assisting Raylia in locating the commanders from above. Although they both agreed with the plan, Raylia insisted that she could wipe out the entire enemy force quickly. However, Yuya explained that this was a war between the kingdom and the empire, and the appearance of a dragon amidst a conflict between humans would cause problems later on. Prince Leon also agreed, emphasizing that even if victory was achieved thanks to Raylia's strength, this doesn't prevent other countries from attacking them either. Therefore, they need to make a real contribution to the outcome of the battle. He also pointed out that they were prepared to fight even without the heroes, and although the current situation was more favorable, they still needed to carefully consider their position. A knight entered the tent, announcing that the Minotaur's horn group had arrived. Yuya wondered why Prince Leon had given them the name, which had Greek meanings. The adventurers introduced themselves, but Yuya quickly realized their names were all sexually suggestive wordplay. The team leader, Eric Kalk, proudly declared that it was an honor to fight alongside the hero, but Yuya couldn't accept it and tried to remain calm. When explaining that they would play a crucial role in the battle, after explaining the plan, Eric realized that only their team could accomplish this mission, and agreed enthusiastically, which made Yuya secretly happy. Because of their professionalism, if you ignore the name. The following day, the Empire's massive army began to advance into the battlefield in the predicted formation, and the Alliance also formed a battle formation. Yuya observed from a nearby hill. He noticed it was already midday, the sky was overcast, and the wind had stopped blowing, creating ideal conditions for his plan. He and his group were south of the Imperial Army, concealed by sensing and observing that the front line of the army was ready, but the rear section was still busy moving. He guessed that the enemy would complete their preparations by the end of the day and begin their attack the following morning. The Allied Corps had prepared ahead of schedule exactly as planned. How to put pressure on the enemy and catch them off guard from the scheme Yuya was about to carry out. Raylia declared it was time to act, and Mel affirmed she was ready. Yuya reiterated each person's role, declaring the start of the plan. To make it a success, he brought some items from Japan, including my favorite new motorcycle, along with the chainsaw and other tools, although it significantly depleted his savings. He told himself that if these items proved ineffective, he would vent his frustration on the Imperial Army. Mel sat behind him, and Yuya put his plan into action. The Allied army began to move to the rhythm of the battle drums. Prince Leon, though somewhat apprehensive, was encouraged by Dukrans that with Yuya's help, they would surely win. He suggested that instead of worrying about the battle, Leon should think about how to handle the aftermath of victory. Leon replied that he wasn't worried about losing the battle. But note that Ron seems to have a great deal of trust in Yuya, a trust he gained after having fought alongside him. He dismissed Leon's concerns, saying that although he wasn't interested in politics, he was confident in his fighting abilities. If the preparations were complete, nothing could go wrong. However, he also warned Leon about his somewhat unpleasant personality. Meanwhile, the Empire's heavy cavalry began a powerful offensive on the battlefield. Yuya observed and realized that his army had been ordered to hold their position to buy more time. Place a layer of protective material around the vehicle. Yuya charged straight into the cavalry's ranks. He knocked down any cavalrymen who dared to stand in his way. Following Yuya's orders, Melthuria activates fire magic, light up a series of fireworks and firecrackers around. The sudden explosions and flashes of light terrified the Imperial cavalry. And despite the commander's attempts to control them, the frightened horses began to thrash about, throwing the cavalrymen off their backs. Taking advantage of the chaos, the Allied forces launched a strong counterattack. Mel was thrilled to see their plan work. Yuya used his car to ram into some of the cavalrymen, but with his shield he was only strong enough to take down a few hundred people. To completely disrupt the cavalry formation, he prepared 30 sets of fireworks and firecrackers for Mel to use. Horses in this world have similar personalities to horses on Earth, being very sensitive to loud noises and having a strong instinct to run away, especially when frightened. When the first horse panics, the entire herd loses control. The tactic created the perfect opportunity for the Allied forces to charge. With this front resolved, Yuya and Mel continue to move forward, while on the other side, the group of adventurers confronted the enemy's heavy cavalry. Their mages created a series of fireballs, inflicting damage on the cavalry formation. The cavalry commander tried to calm his soldiers, but Yuya unexpectedly rammed his vehicle into him, causing him to fall. He noticed that the Minotaur party was holding its ground, slowing down the enemy's left flank. Upon hearing the cries for help from the injured, Yuya asked Mel to come and help. The princess quickly arrived at the scene, treat injured adventurers. I decided to stay and support them with my healing abilities. Further out on the battlefield, Raylia observed the situation. As the battle intensified, she told Tia to get ready because their time had come. Tia affirmed her readiness, even without much preparation. But Raylia noticed Tia's tail wagging excitedly. Raylia reminded her to stay calm because the real battle hadn't even begun for them yet. Tia apologized, confessing that she had been too eager at the thought of finally being able to get revenge on the Empire. Raylia suddenly remembered that Tia's family had died while being enslaved, and Tia herself had narrowly escaped being sold into slavery. The Empire was the only country that had not abolished slavery, therefore Raylia understood Tia's motivations. Seeing her enthusiasm, Raylia thought that Yuya would be very pleased to know that Tia was so determined to complete her mission, and Raylia herself felt the same way. Raylia transformed into a dragon right in front of them. Then it spewed flames across the enemy ranks. Then she flew high into the air. It dodged arrows that couldn't penetrate its thick skin. The beam focused on searching for the enemy commander, and finally located him, while trying to rearrange the team lineup. Then he signaled Raylia to attack. As Imperial troops fired at them, Tia asked Raylia to give her that thing. Raylia opened a small portal, allowing the Beast Girl to take out a bottle of Molotov cocktail. He lit the fuse and threw it at the enemy cavalry. The flames spread throughout the enemy ranks. This caused them to panic. Raylia secretly thought that if Yuya wanted to burn down the Imperial army, she is perfectly capable of using her fire breath. Meanwhile, Taya laughed maniacally as she prepared her next weapon, relishing the sight of the soldiers screaming in agony as the flames consumed them. Raylia began to feel uneasy, wondering if her teammate was possessed by a demon upon witnessing Tia's horrific cruelty. However, Tia was still eager to guide her to the next target, and Raylia relentlessly unleashed flames across the battlefield. Meanwhile, at the Allied army camp, a guard reported that Yuya would soon advance into the heart of the Imperial army. General Ragan led the 1st and 2nd battalions in an attack, while Prince Leon observed from a distance. Seeing the fireworks illuminating the sky reminded them of the tactics Yuya had explained to them. According to the plan, the light and noise from the fireworks would distract the enemy's heavy cavalry and slow them down for about 10 minutes. This opened up an opportunity for the Allied cavalry and infantry to launch a fierce attack. Deciding the outcome of the battle, Allied infantry would avoid engaging cavalry charging at full speed to minimize casualties, only attacking cavalrymen who were stunned. Although some cavalry might break through the lines, when guards reported that Imperial cavalry had approached the first line of defense, the prince ordered the attack. The Imperial cavalry charged into a barricade of spikes, and as the first riders charged through the gaps between the spikes, they were suddenly struck down by the steel wires strung between them. Although they were initially surprised, some knights discovered a gap without ropes and believed they had found a way out. Charge forward with confidence. They stumbled again, overwhelmed by the next hidden obstacle. Standing on the watchtower, the guards reported to Prince Leon about the success of Operation Wire. Yuya used a chainsaw to prepare the sharpened stakes and provided steel wire to stretch horizontally between them at just the right height to make them difficult for the Imperial Knights to notice, until it was too late. He also placed camouflage obstacles in the gaps to make the enemy mistake them for escape routes. From there, the sentence gained more time. After passing the first barrier, the Imperial army advanced to the second line of defense, only to fall into hidden traps. According to Yuya's plan, his strategy aimed to minimize casualties for the Allied forces while maximizing losses for the enemy. By fighting relentlessly and leading his troops on the front lines, he demonstrated the qualities of a true hero, both inspiring his soldiers and protecting the civilians. He was always at the forefront, especially in battles against the Demon King's army and evil spirits, fighting relentlessly to achieve victory. However, Prince Leon noticed that Yuya's plans for this battle were somewhat unexpected and unusual. He was about to say something, but as if reading the prince's mind, Duke Lant remarked that this was not at all like Yuya's style. The wizard explained that Yuya always arranged things so that they had the advantage and were proactive in every situation by setting traps and using clever tactics. A style he remarked was unpleasant, much like Yuya's personality. He also recalled their confrontation with the Demon King, when Yuya distracted the opponent with a speech while secretly preparing his magic. To disable the opponent's magical abilities and movement, then remotely unleash spells and spell projectiles for a powerful attack. Yuya only fights fairly as a last resort. He always prioritizes safety and is willing to use underhanded tactics to win. While Leon was pondering this, the guard reported that the Imperial troops had returned to their formation and is rapidly approaching. Lant and the prince stepped forward, accompanied by their mages, waiting for the enemy to approach. Meanwhile, Yuya finally approached the center of the Imperial army, realizing there were too many soldiers for him to break through using only barricades. Although the barrier protected him and his car from damage, he was losing momentum, his speed having dropped by half. I wish I had a bigger car to go on adventures with. But he put that thought aside. Suddenly he spotted a horse-drawn carriage with a man on its roof, whom he guessed was the supreme commander of the Imperial army, and he decided to charge straight toward him. Suddenly a knight appeared right in front of them. He brandished his greatsword and struck the barrier with all his might. This caused his car to stop abruptly. Yuya recognized the man opposite him. The people immediately recognized him as the hero who had returned to this world, surprised by Yuya's appearance. The former hero then raised his sword, declaring that he had returned to help his friends clean up the garbage. When Yuya and the Imperial warrior clashed, the man realized the summoning circle had been destroyed and questioned how Yuya got back. This made Yuya realize that the Empire had done everything in its power to prevent his return. No reply. He continued his attack, quickly closing the gap. Then he pulled a can of pepper spray from his inventory and blinded his opponent. Ignoring the insults, Yuya seized the opportunity to finish off his opponent with a single slash. Then he focused on the supreme commander of the Imperial army seated in the carriage. The man angrily reprimanded the soldiers and urged them to kill Yuya. Jump into the car and asked if he was the supreme commander. Seeing his opponent's panicked expression, Yuya threw a powerful punch, knocking him unconscious instantly. Recognizing him as the crown prince of the empire, Yuya had originally intended to capture or kill this commander outright, but decided to bring him back to the Alliance camp for Prince Leon to deal with. Although he knew a little about politics, Yuya guessed that keeping him alive might bring greater benefits. He quickly teleported back to the Alliance camp. Prince Leon and Duke Lant stood stunned by the horrific sight before them. All the Imperial cavalrymen who had entered the camp had fallen within seconds. Leon asked the sorcerer what kind of poison he had used, but the sorcerer replied that it was because Yuya had taught him, although he himself didn't fully understand it. According to Yuya's explanation, humans need air to breathe, and air needs a certain concentration of fire-carrying particles, which are also necessary for a flame to burn. If a wizard uses magic to seal off the space from all sides and create wind to push these particles out, their concentration will drop to dangerous levels, causing suffocation. Prince Leon thoughtfully remarked that the soldiers could have held their breath upon sensing something unusual. Leon then learned from the sorcerer's explanation that the concentration of particles had dropped to a level where they would lose consciousness after just 1 or 2 breaths. This principle applies to any living creature, whether animal or monster. The sorcerer admitted that he couldn't explain it any further because he didn't fully understand it himself, but recommended that they not reveal it. Alia agreed, emphasizing that discovering a new way to kill with magic was extremely dangerous and suggesting that it be kept secret. Yuya appeared, and without looking back, Prince Leon asked if he had succeeded. Looking at the pile of soldiers' bodies, Yuya insisted that he had won. At that moment, everyone heard the retreat signal echoing from the Imperial army. Prince Leon coldly announced that they had won. As the battle drew to a close, Prince Leon immediately ordered his soldiers to prepare to care for the wounded. While the infantry captured stray Imperial troops, the cavalry patrolled the outer perimeter for security, and the engineering corps set up new encampments. Observe your surroundings as people rush to complete their tasks. Yuya realized there was nothing left to do. and as the soldiers reinforced the outer perimeter, he considered assisting in the relief effort. However, he noticed the atmosphere seemed heavy while he was there. Although the Empire no longer seemed like an immediate threat, Yuya knew this was only a temporary lull, as they had not yet completely annihilated the enemy forces. Suddenly, he saw Raylia flying overhead, and when she landed with Tia, Yuya congratulated both of them for their contributions in the battle, asking if they were injured. Both Raylia and Tia confirmed that they were safe, because the Imperial army was no match for them. He noticed Tia looking at him intently, expecting a compliment, and he patted her head as a thank you, which made her extremely happy. Raylia confidently announced that everything was fine, then asked about the plans for the future. Yuya said they would discuss it when everyone returned, and suggested they take a short break. Tia excitedly agreed, waiting nearby, her eyes sparkling with joy at the compliments. Watching them go, Yuya felt relieved to realize he was no longer alone. Meanwhile, at the Allied Forces headquarters, Prince Leon praised everyone for their tireless efforts, saying that it was thanks to their hard work that the Imperial army understood that the Alliance was not easily defeated. As a representative of the Kingdom of Arianas, he expressed his deep gratitude to everyone. General Regan later reported the casualty figures, stating that 1,253 had been killed and 895 seriously wounded. The losses were evenly distributed among the kingdom, territories, the Federation of City-States, and adventurers and volunteers, with the latter suffering the heaviest casualties. This didn't surprise Yuya because when Mel joined in to treat them, many were drawn into the battle with no way out, facing heavy cavalry without giving up an inch of ground. Even knowing it was war, Yuya felt the weight of the immense loss resulting from the plan he himself had proposed, leaving him in a somber mood, and Raylia noticed his gloomy demeanor. General Reagan went on to report on the Empire's losses, estimating that 12,000 heavy cavalrymen had been killed and 3,000 captured. Meanwhile, 10,000 light cavalrymen were killed, mostly by Tia and Raylia on the left flank. He also listed infantry losses, including 15,000 deserting mercenaries, most of whom sought asylum. In total, he calculated that the Imperial army had lost 31,000 killed and 5,000 captured, and including deserters, the Imperial force had been reduced from 80,000 to 30,000, with an unknown number of wounded. They still retained about 10,000 infantry troops stationed at Fristol. The coalition representatives were astonished by the heavy losses the Imperial army had suffered after just one battle, with one of them calling it a complete victory and expressing excitement at this overwhelming win. Yuya was thanked for his strategy and efforts, and Raylia for her strength. However, neither Yuya nor Raylia seemed pleased by the praise. Duke Lance later stated that, despite the victory, the price paid was significant, with them suffering heavy losses at Fristol, where the surviving Imperial soldiers were stationed. Deputy Captain Bruno Reggi continued, explaining that although Fristol was located within the kingdom's territory, the city was currently occupied by the Empire, and unlike on the battlefield, the enemy was holding civilians hostage within the city, making fighting there completely different from the previous battle. While others continued their debate, Yuya realized that Lance and Reg had noticed his unhappiness, changing the subject of their discussion as they understood each other too well after fighting together for so long. With over 4,000 soldiers killed and wounded in the recent battle, any praise for Yuya only left him feeling empty. Although he has no regrets about his strategy, the profound loss still weighs heavily on his heart. The Imperial army suffered far greater losses but survived for 3 years. This world has taught Yuya that tolerance for enemies is dangerous. He cannot sympathize with the Empire and knows that he must focus on his next move. Prince Leon then declared that the war was not over, but that they would celebrate victory today. With abundant resources seized from the Empire, Leon assigned men to guard them while the rest rested. He particularly praised the explorers and volunteers for completing their perilous mission, suffered greater losses than any other force in the army, and for contributing to keeping the Allied infantry fighting continuously. We send them our sincere gratitude. Leon announced that everyone would be rewarded upon their return to the capital, and that celebratory wine would be prepared for a victory party. The leader of the Halls of the Minotaur group thanked the prince for his gratitude, while frankly sharing that most of them risked their lives for money or excitement. He smiled at Yuya and said that they chose to do this out of passion and didn't expect anyone to feel sorry for them. When Leon accepted this offer, Yuya offered the prince his 10,000 cavalrymen. Seeing their surprised faces, Yuya quickly clarified that he didn't need the force immediately. Tomorrow would suffice. General Reagan asked him what he intended to do with the troops. Yuya explained that a direct attack on Fristal, which the Empire was occupying and holding civilians hostage, would only result in more innocent deaths in the kingdom. Instead, Yuya boldly suggested they target the imperial capital. Upon hearing this, both Prince Leon and General Reagan fell silent, astonished by his audacious plan. Yuya went on to explain that, although the capital had a guard force of 30,000 troops, most were just bodyguards and guards, lacking real combat experience, a stark contrast to the seasoned warriors in Fristal. Furthermore, Yuya had visited the imperial capital before, and was familiar with its terrain. The Empire had poured all its military resources into the invasion, leaving them with a thinly spread army and making it difficult for them to provide timely support to the capital. The palace guards were the most elite, but now that the Empire was unable to mobilize its army for self-defense, Yuya was confident he could march straight to the capital and capture the emperor. With his audacious plan, he declared that if the kingdom intended to attack the capital, this was the most opportune time. Thinking about this, Prince Leon acknowledged that this strategy might help them turn the tide and sought General Regan's advice. General Regan replied that if the horses were stripped of their armor and kept only in their saddles, they could reach the capital in about 10 days. Fortunately, they had enough horses after capturing thousands of imperial war horses from the battlefield, but they still needed more people to join the journey. Duke Lance spoke up, suggesting that some mages capable of using storage magic should participate. Each man could carry the equivalent of a wagon load of goods, and together they could supply enough provisions for a 10-day march. Leon agreed to this plan, declaring that the remaining mages would help hold Fristal. However, another officer pointed out that even with that support, their forces were insufficient to hold out if the Empire were to send troops again. Yuya understood this was true because, although they had inflicted a heavy defeat on the Imperial army on the battlefield, the remaining 40,000 soldiers in Fristal still posed a significant threat. The entire Allied force of 20,000 soldiers was insignificant compared to them. Hearing this, Raylia volunteered to stay, confidently declaring that if the Imperial army dared to leave Fristal, she would transform into a dragon and strike terror into their hearts. Yuya was surprised by her offer, but General Regan immediately concluded that with the dragon's assistance in protecting Fristal, they should set off for the imperial capital as soon as they were ready. Leon immediately declared that he would assume the role of commander-in-chief of the forces sent on this mission. Both Yuya and Malthuria were surprised, with Yuya anxiously emphasizing that his plan was still dangerous, and Malthuria insisting that her brother should stay behind to command the army to reclaim Fristal. However, Leon was resolute. He understood the risks but emphasized that after they successfully captured the Empire's capital, there would be major political upheavals. He pointed out that Yuya had no intention of completely destroying the Empire. Leon emphasized that they needed someone capable of making decisions about signing treaties or overseeing post-war recovery, and he was the most suitable candidate. He also added that Malthuria wasn't good at political negotiations and teased her, saying because she seemed determined to spend time with Yuya, her feelings might cause her to lose her objectivity. This made Malthuria blush, and she awkwardly denied it. Leon reassured her that General Vistas would take the main command, while he would only follow Yuya, promising not to put himself in danger. Finally, the princess relented. Yuya secretly told himself that if anything went wrong, he could use teleportation magic to bring the prince back to the kingdom. The problem was solved. Leon announced that they would prepare tomorrow and depart at dawn the following day, taking a roundabout route to deceive the Imperial army at Fristal, making them think Leon had returned to the palace, before diverting their course toward the Imperial capital. Since this invasion wasn't part of the original plan, Yuya was happy to have extra soldiers accompanying him. But there was also cause for concern, because Mel and Leon, with their royal status, were willing to put themselves in danger. Over the following days, the army began its march towards the imperial capital with 12,000 cavalrymen, while the rest of the force was ordered to surround Fristal to prevent an attack from the rear. The cavalry unit, led by Leon, rode towards the capital with General Vistas of the Land as his deputy, accompanied by Bruno, Reg Lant, and Tia. General Reagan was in charge of the siege of Fristal, with Raylia, Mel, and volunteers providing support. The other adventurers split into small groups to capture the stray Imperial soldiers, but the Minotaur horns decided to accompany Yuya to the capital for some reason. Yuya thought that if everything went smoothly, the war with the Empire would almost be over. And even if something didn't go as planned, he wouldn't let it stop him. As the journey drew to a close, the capital of the Beale's Empire finally came into view. Although it should have taken longer, they arrived in just 7 days by riding heavy war horses without armor. The team decided to proceed by charging straight through the main gate and using magic to break it down. Once inside, they galloped at full speed along the main road reserved for the nobility, heading straight towards the royal palace. Yuya was worried about not encountering any patrols or soldiers along the way, and became suspicious when they saw the palace gates wide open, fearing it might be a trap. He summoned Kaguru and sent him ahead to scout the traps and capture the emperor if he encountered no resistance. The biggest surprise was when Kaguru, the giant wolf, charged through the guards without anyone stopping him. Yuya decided to enter the palace. He was confident that he could handle whatever came his way. His confusion only increased when he arrived at the palace grounds, and was greeted by a figure of aristocratic bearing, accompanied by an older man and several guards. When the whole group dismounted, Yuya and Prince Leon were greeted by this young man. He introduced himself as Leonis Lucier, the third prince of the Bellis Empire. Yuya was surprised to meet the third prince of the empire, as he had never known of his existence before. He only knew about the emperor and the foolish crown prince he had captured on the battlefield, and he had heard rumors that the second prince seemed rather gloomy. Although I had heard vaguely about a third prince, but he never imagined things would turn out this way. It felt like he'd been ambushed when confronted by Leonis. Breaking the tense silence, Leon introduced himself to the third prince, suggesting that with his warm welcome, the Leonis understood the reason for their visit. Leon did not hesitate to ask the prince to bring their emperor to meet Otham. After a moment of silence, Leonis replied solemnly that the emperor had died 3 days earlier. This news left both Leon and Yuya shocked and confused. Leon went on to ask whether the crown prince was the heir to the throne, and Leonis acknowledged that under normal circumstances, that would be obvious. But now, the crown prince is facing accusations of unilaterally mobilizing imperial forces without the emperor's permission. If these accusations are proven true, the crown prince would be guilty of treason and would lose his right to succession. Dissatisfied with the explanation, Leon asked if this meant the surprise invasion of his kingdom had been launched by the crown prince without the empire's consent. Leonis replied that this wasn't entirely true. While the throne didn't fully accept the current situation, the crown prince's actions still affected the empire's image, and therefore, the potential successor still had to bear responsibility. Prince Leon grew increasingly impatient and demanded clarification of the meaning. Leonis explained that while the crown prince was on trial, his brother Bard, second in line to the throne, had also renounced his right to succession, as he was only interested in his studies. Leon asked if that meant the third prince was now emperor. When Leonis confirmed it, Leon continued to inquire about how they would end the current war. With a pensive expression, Emperor Leonis formally proposed surrender to the kingdom of Arianus, Ilvinia, and the eastern city-states. Both Leon and Yuya were surprised by this quick surrender. But Leonis explained that with the hero's return and the Black Dragon on Ariana's side, the Empire was no longer interested in prolonging the war, as it only brought suffering and destruction to the people. Yuya realized that in reality the Empire had no other choice, because they had mobilized their entire force for the invasion and lost half their troops. They now faced the enemy army approaching the city gates along with their hero. Although some concessions would certainly have to be made, but Yuya felt Leonis could have requested a peace treaty or ceasefire before surrendering. He thought the Emperor's sudden death was no mere coincidence, whatever the cause, and with the crown prince out of favor and the second prince abdicating the throne, Yuya suspects that the third prince is secretly manipulating the situation. However, his motives remain a mystery. Leonis then invited them to rest comfortably before proceeding with negotiations on the terms of surrender, and offered to arrange accommodation for them right in the palace. Yuya and Leon exchanged glances. There was no reason to refuse the offer, but they also didn't dare let their guard down. After confirming that Kaguru hadn't detected any signs of an ambush or trap, they agreed on the condition that they be allowed to bring 20 soldiers and keep their weapons, something the Emperor agreed to. A servant was assigned to attend to them while Leonis was away. Yuya whispered to General Vistas that everything was going too smoothly. I suspect the landlord's true intentions. Vistas and Leon both share this concern, with Leon reminding his teammates to always be vigilant. Once everyone was seated around the table, the Emperor's assistant began negotiations, presenting the Empire's formal surrender offer to the Allies and inquiring about their conditions. Leon immediately demanded that the Imperial army withdraw from Frystal at once and return all looted property, as well as compensate for the damage caused by the invasion. Furthermore, Leon demanded the abolition of slavery within the Empire, the criminalization of the slave trade, and the enactment of laws to compensate enslaved people and assist their repatriation. He also declared that the Allied forces would remain stationed within the Empire until the above demands were met, and the cost of maintaining these forces would be entirely covered by the Empire's funds. While the Empire guaranteed the security of the Allied troops and officials, the royal secretaries whispered among themselves. Yuya told himself that the terms relating to slavery would be very difficult to accept. The imperial workforce relied heavily on slaves, which helped them reduce costs, allowing for large military expenditures and territorial expansion. Even civilians owned slaves. Furthermore, Yuya did not expect them to sit idly by and accept paying for the occupation of his country. After some thought, the emperor suggested freeing only slaves from allied nations, as some were sentenced to slavery due to crimes or bankruptcy. Acknowledging that they had not done enough to prevent slave trade raids, however, arguing that it would be difficult to distinguish the origins of the slaves, Yuya insisted that all slaves should be freed. The emperor agreed, and then turned to the issue of occupation, agreeing not to hinder the Allied forces but requesting that conditions be established for their departure and for the empire to regain its independence. They spent an hour discussing the details and finally reached an agreement. Regardless of the third prince's plans, the war had officially ended, and even though a ceasefire had been reached, Yuya still felt that things weren't quite over. Meanwhile, Leonis secretly noted that the conditions were neither entirely unexpected nor excessive, but precisely what he needed for his plan. In fact, he considered the idea of a unified continent for the empire to be mere fantasy, and slavery was unsustainable. Those who benefited from it did not contribute back to the empire, while the system itself caused poverty and mass migration by disrupting the labor market. Leonis intended to use this opportunity to abolish slavery, create jobs for the poor, and revive the ailing economy, using the war defeat as a pretext to push for change despite facing internal opposition. The empire suffered heavy losses, but Yuya's appearance not only turned the tide of the battle, it also paved the way for the third prince to implement his reform plans. Upon returning to Ariana Grande, Yuya and Tia disguised themselves to infiltrate the palace and report to the king. Beast Girl was overjoyed at having successfully defended the kingdom. But Yuya still felt uneasy. After so much blood was shed in the battle, upon entering the palace, they were greeted by the lady-in-waiting Eris, and she jokingly said she wanted to offer herself to express her gratitude. Melthuria reminded her to stop joking, but Eris just laughed and asked if that meant she had to wait her turn, causing the princess to blush. Yuya stepped forward to greet the king. "I received congratulations from you," when Yuya handed over the agreement with the empire and a letter addressed to him. After reading the letter, the king ordered Minister Belrice to oversee the deployment of the occupying forces to the empire. Reluctantly, the minister thanked Yuya as he passed by. The king then thanked Yuya for everything, but Yuya replied that he simply wanted to protect his friends in the kingdom, emphasizing that the king should also thank Tia, Aurelia, and Melthuria. Nevertheless, His Majesty insisted on rewarding Yuya, and, reiterating that he was from another world, he once again offered to marry his daughter to him. This made the princess blush with embarrassment. When the king hinted that the princess, though lacking in bust size, made up for it in other areas, the queen beat him mercilessly. The queen, acting on behalf of her husband, considered the appropriate reward and sent her sincere thanks to Tia for all she had done. When you see that the people you love are safe, Yuya felt relieved and happy. However, the unexpected appearance of Eris, the man made the offer again, which frightened him. Yuya decided to lock himself in his room to avoid these awkward situations, and finally returned to the temple of the goddess Valerian. Yuya asked to be left alone to pray, and then the goddess appeared. He spoke in an unpleasant tone. When he asked about the things that were bothering him, the goddess suddenly became serious and agreed to answer. Yuya asked why he could still use magic when he returned to his own world. The goddess replied that all the magic and power he possessed were honed through his own training, so she could not take them away. She could only help him get started with some skills such as storage, appraisal, and multilingualism, but everything else was his own to master. Yuya mentioned that interdimensional summoning is impossible, and asked what her intentions are. The goddess explained that she had never truly thanked him for destroying the evil god Ruenavilio. She gave him 2 teleportation artifacts, allowing him to travel between the 2 worlds. Keep the time at the starting point, the same as the last time he returned. When Yuya asked her what she really wanted him to do with these things, the goddess frankly stated that she wished for him to get married and leave behind descendants in this world. She explained that Ruenavilio had once ascended to godhood, absorbing impurities from the world. And this means that one day Ruenavilio will regain his divine power and history will repeat itself, because that world has no way to cleanse itself of its impurities. Initially, Ruenavilio was a benevolent god who loved humankind, but as he absorbed the negative energy of humanity, he gradually lost his mind and became an evil god, spreading wickedness and madness into the world. The goddess wanted Yuya to establish a lineage in that world to help purify it of impurities. She admitted she wasn't sure if he would agree to come back. Yuya asked if she was behind the Empire's invasion, but the goddess denied it, saying it was just a dispute between humans. She revealed that by absorbing a lot of magic and defeating Ruenavilio, Yuya gained extended lifespan and a portion of divinity, allowing him to live twice as long as an average person. In a serious tone, the goddess said that although she couldn't force him, she wished Yuya to have at least 20 children, but ideally 100 to establish a lineage. Yuya vehemently objected, shouting that she was insane to demand that a 23-year-old single man have 100 children. After receiving an answer from the goddess, Yuya decided to return. Goodbye and best wishes. The goddess vanished, leaving him alone in the temple. While pleased with the moving relics, the notion of extended lifespan and the task of establishing a lineage weighed heavily on his mind. Yuya planned to return to his room in the palace and use the artifact to go back to his own world. Around midnight, he suddenly realized what he had just heard. A heavy feeling overwhelmed him as he collapsed, realizing that his normal student life was gone forever. Upon returning to Japan, Melthuria thanked Yuya's mother for letting her stay, promising to try to learn about the country and to ask for help when needed. Tia and Raylia were also present, causing Ayumi to scream in surprise upon seeing these beautiful women. After facing the Empire at Wilterius, Yuya thought he would be able to return home peacefully, but instead, he was severely scolded by his mother. His mother, who would normally remain silent if he didn't want to go into detail, was different that day. When Yuya asked her why she was so interested that day, she said she felt he had changed in some way. Finally, he sat down by the door and recounted everything that had happened since he was summoned to Wilterius. To prove his point, Yuya used a teleportation artifact to transport his mother to the afterlife, introducing her to his friends and family there. His mother listened attentively to every detail of his experiences in Wilterius. He even met the king and queen, who apologized for forcing her son to defend the kingdom against his will. Afterward, Yuya's mother listened to the whole story from beginning to end, without interjecting any comments. Raylia and Tia also took her to visit the capital and other important places in the kingdom, including the battlefield. They spent about 2 weeks there, and during that time, Yuya's mother became close to Raylia, Tia, Melthuria, the king, and the queen. She even befriended Minister Belrius, with whom she seemed to get along very well. Knowing what had happened, Yuya's mother finally felt at ease. However, the peace in Wilterius didn't last long, because after only a short time Zanao reappeared. Yuya did everything he could to help the kingdom recover from the war. He thought he would return to Japan to live a normal life, but his mother happily announced that Raylia and Melthuria would be staying with them for a while. At that point, there was no other way, so he packed their belongings, still intrigued by these beautiful girls. Ayumi insisted on knowing why Raylia and Melthuria had come to live with them, and wondered why everyone was so beautiful. Yuya was just joking that it was all fate. Everything happened so fast, to the point that Yuya gradually got used to having breakfast with everyone. One morning he announced that he would be going out with his college friends the following week, and asked everyone to look after the house. Even more surprisingly, his younger sister Ayumi didn't complain and readily agreed. He also reminded Raylia and Melthuria about taking care of the house, and they agreed in a rather unusual way. This surprised the young man, Ayumi whispered that Akane was just as excited, but Yuya didn't hear her, and he became even more confused when she wished him good luck, even though the exam was over. Before leaving the room, she gave a mysterious smile. Yuya stood up, preparing to go to university, with the girls watching him go. When he arrived at school, he saw a brand new, shiny, and incredibly beautiful motorcycle parked right outside. I wonder who its owner is. This 400 cubic centimeter bike is clearly far superior to his. He was instantly captivated and, feeling a little bored, decided to find more work to upgrade his car. Upon entering the classroom where he intended to meet his classmates, Yuya was surprised to see Akane sitting there. When the meeting began, Akane occasionally came to the club room to hang out. But today's meeting was about the members' summer trip, and he didn't think she'd be there just for fun. Surprisingly, the club president introduced Akane as a new member. She revealed that she will be joining the group on the trip next week. As they went through the schedule, Yuya wondered what was happening and why she hadn't told him. She replied that he hadn't said anything to her about Raylia either, revealing that she knew Raylia was living with him and jokingly calling him a pervert. Yuya tried to explain, saying that it was his mother who decided Raylia should stay, and he knew absolutely nothing about it. However, their argument was quickly interrupted by the club president, who joked that they were close friends, making both of them the center of attention. The chairman then distributed guidebooks on the itinerary and accommodation to everyone, instructed Yuya to ensure Akane had everything she needed for the trip, and then adjourned the meeting. Go out. Akane shyly asked Yuya if he was dating Raylia, Tia, or Melthuria. This left him confused, and he immediately denied it, frantically declaring that he was still single. Upon hearing this, Akane was delighted and sarcastically remarked that he had no flirting skills whatsoever, her comment like a dagger piercing his self-esteem. Yuya was still shocked to learn that Akane had bought a motorcycle, and even more surprised to realize that she was the owner of the new bike he had seen in the lot. He asked if her father had so readily agreed to let her buy one like that. Akane's father was strangely indulgent towards his daughter, but extremely annoyed when any boy approached her. When Yuya went to her house to help her study for exams, her father gave him a glass of soda mixed with soy sauce and told him it was Coca-Cola, which got Yuya into big trouble when Akane and her mother found out. Yuya still found it hard to believe that he let her buy the car without objecting. But then everything became clear when Akane revealed that her parents met because of their shared passion for motorcycles, and only gave them up after her mother became pregnant. Akane still found the old man's comments about motorcyclists confusing, but he thought maybe he was just looking for reasons to dislike Yuya. Akane got her driver's license a month ago after taking a 2-month course, and initially had some difficulty crossing the wooden bridge. Yuya asked if the upcoming trip would be too much for her, but she shyly replied that they still had a few days before their departure, suggesting that they could try a short trip together first. He agreed, which made her overjoyed, and they started planning the trip for next Saturday. Yuya secretly found the peace of his current life particularly special. This feeling seemed even more profound than the adventurous journeys he had undertaken in Viltrius. He understood that this peaceful life would be his new state of being. And he was certain that countless things would happen, and he would encounter many troubles in his life. But this time he felt confident that he could overcome it all. He had so much he wanted to protect. And I will not let this new life become meaningless. I am determined to make everything perfect. He smiled, telling himself that this would be his happy ending. Lost the days after the hero's return.